Evening. Let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. It is 6:01, so I apologize for our tardiness. We'll begin with our roll call. Aniskevich. Here. Gippin. Here. Peoples. Here. Lewis.
Here.
Costa. Present. Richards.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Boyd here. We are missing Ms. Castle. She is out on work-related training, so we will miss her on this evening. Glad to see everybody here today. Do I have a motion to approve last meeting's minutes?
So move.
Get a second?
Second.
Get a vote here. Aniskevich?
Yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Thank you very much. We'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is our public comment. We are allowing each person 3 minutes to speak. If there are any public comments at this time, we welcome those. Ms. Aniskevich.
Yes, Vicky Shockey, please.
Hello.
Hello.
My main concern is the brutality that these officers are doing to people. I think they go to extremes too far sometimes, and I would like to see something change about that, about the brutality of people, the way they're getting treated or talked to. That is my biggest concern about the police officers. I know they have a tough job. They have a lot of people to deal with in different manners or whatever, but I think they need to understand some people might have mental illnesses, and you might not know that. Maybe they need to have special training to find out if that person has mental illnesses. But that is my biggest concern, is the brutality that the police are doing or the people that they're dealing with are doing. I would like to see some changes with the brutality. Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Mylett.
Good evening again, everyone.
Good evening.
I had a challenging Monday when I spoke at the city council meeting, because I have faced discriminatory practices by police officers, not here in Akron. I love Akron. You all are some really kind people. But I had a moment of a memory on Monday, and I read one of the poems I wrote. I lost my children and my rights and my voice and everything to bad policing from another place. And this evening, I came to talk to you. I'm a multiracial American citizen, and I'm concerned about biased policing through racism as well as sexism. My matters were not addressed because of the color of my skin and because of my gender. I know many times when in domestic violence situations, when the police are called, many times the women are labeled as mentally ill when are very outspoken and don't stop talking. But that's not always the case, because sometimes people are in a state of panic. But I would ask that we would go deeper and look further. I don't support racism from anybody. I don't care what color you are. Neither do I support violence and discrimination because of my being a heterosexual female. I became positive and productive, not negative. And I would love to work with your group. I'm running for President of the United States of America for the 2024 election with a new party. It's a multi-partisan party, and it's called the People's Party. And one of the entities I have in place is called Mothers' Lives Matter, Moms' Lives Matter. One of the challenges in policing that I have witnessed and experienced is that the mother is discounted because people don't understand the role and the responsibility of a mother, and the mother is denied resources. So therefore, police information increases against the mother because the mother is denied resources. I will be having a community meeting and resource platform at Chase Bank on the 30th of this month in the LeBron James room. And I would love if someone from your organization or you all would come so that the community would have an option to know that the police are concerned about mothers also and the rights and the resources for mothers. I'm not talking about any particular color. I'm not talking about a mother with 5 children versus one with 1. I'm talking about mothers. And one thing that Children's Services does is they discriminate against the mothers. And I would ask that you all would please look into that. One of the things I also do is I have an organization called the International Heterosexual Clergy Alliance. And I go throughout the community into events, and I find out the needs of the people, the concerns, the comments, and the commitments that people have. And I would love if you all would work with me. My phone number is 330-428-9191. I brought Vicki with me this evening because I would love for you all to hear what people really have to say that are concerned and maybe even afraid to talk to the police about the police.
Okay, thank you.
You all have a blessed evening. We have somewhere else
Thank
to
you.
be.
Could you tell us again the date of your event?
June 30th from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. in the Chase Bank LeBron James room. And if you have something you want to do, just let me know. I welcome you to do it. Okay, thank you. Sir, I left your voter registration forms here too for people if you need them.
Ms. Sanders, is that all public comments?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. We have invited and asked Akron Police Department Chief Mylett to come and be with us to talk about some of the name tag concerns that we started last week with Deputy Mayor Tucker. And so we welcome Chief Mylett at this time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this distinguished body. I thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you this evening. Deputy Chief Harding is here to assist as well. He's going to be handing out a booklet that contains a lot of data and a lot of information. I know the main topic that we're going to talk about tonight are the name tags and the reasons behind it, but I wanted to seize an opportunity to share data with you based on information that I've heard in other meetings and conversations I've had with some of you regarding everything from uses of force, complaints, complaints, and then the current situation with violence in this city. Deputy Mayor Tucker was here last week, and I think he did a pretty good job answering a lot of the questions regarding the issue of name tags. I know that there was some questions that were also posed to him after the meeting. One is, threats. How do we determine threats? I've asked our Chief Prosecutor, Craig Morgan, to join me here tonight, along with the Chief of Staff, Gert Wilms, to answer some of those questions. Nobody better positioned than our Chief Prosecutor to explain all of the intricacies of the law, and he can do a much better job than I can. But if you will allow me, I'm going to work off a script, because if I don't work off a script, we're going to be here for a while. The last tab in your booklet, I didn't finish my script, so I'm going to work off script with that one. So if you would, please, turn to tab 1. It says Akron Police Department's call for service, complaints, and use of force. So calls for service have been pretty consistent for the past 4 years. In 2019, the department moved to a new computer-aided dispatch system so we could better track calls for service. The second page of this, the information contained on this page includes the number of complaints made against APD employees since 2019. As you can see, the numbers have been consistent. And when you consider the number of interactions employees have with the community in any given year, that number is insanely low. The percentage of complaints compared against the number of interactions we have with the public is way below 1%. This is a hope and a dream for any administrator, member of the public, and community leaders. This is my 4th department that I've served in. And as a chief of police, I hope for those levels, those numbers. And again, since the adoption of body cameras in Akron, Brian, when did we go to body cameras? I should have asked you this before. That tool, for me, in my view, is a game changer in policing, because no longer do we take the officer's word for something or the member of the public. We go to the video and we look at the video to find truth. Not saying that the two people reporting things aren't telling the truth, but this is the unbiased witness that the supervisors are able to go to determine if there was any misconduct during that interaction, and we frequently use the body camera. The evidence certainly assists us in determining whether the officer violated department policies or not. Where we identify misconduct, we use the disciplinary system to modify and correct behavior. If the misconduct is of such a nature, serious nature, the employee can and will face discipline up to and including termination of employment, and if it goes into criminality, then they are charged with a crime. The use of force data, let me make sure I'm on the right page. If you turn to the next page, it says Akron Police Department, all calls for service and use of force. The use of force data also helps us to tell the story of APD. The data before you demonstrates that since 2019, when compared to the number of documented contacts we have with the public, officers used force less than 1% of those interactions and contacts, less than 1%. Again, that is a hope and aspiration of any administrator and the public. To me, the two data points, coupled with the very low number of complaints we receive in a given year, indicates that your police officers perform their duties professionally and consistently use de-escalation tactics to diffuse situations. They're not perfect, folks, and they're going to make mistakes. And if it's a mistake and we'll deal with it. If it's something coming from a place of hate or bigotry or anything like that, they're gone. Since I've been chief of police here for the last 2 years, I have not seen that. I haven't seen anything even remotely close to it. Again, we're able to go to that unbiased third party, the body camera, to determine the interaction between the employee and the member of the public. If you turn to tab 2, and the page I'm on is shots fired, shootings, calls for service, and firearm stats. In Table 1, shots fired and shooting calls for service, CFS. As you can see from that table, since 2019, APD officers have responded to over 11,000 shots fired calls in Akron. For a city this size, that is quite high, and that is not trigger pulls. These are incidents. Sometimes we get dispatched to a report of a shooting or shots fired, officers get there, they're not finding any evidence. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, we're just not seeing things in public view. Could be in the backyard or somewhere else. But officers oftentimes respond to these calls and they'll find one casing, the jacket where the bullet was housed in, that was ejected from the firearm. One round, one casing, two casings, up to 100 casings at some of these crime scenes. So the 11,000 is, again, it's not trigger pulls. These are incidents where calls for service involving shots fired occurred. The middle table, discharging firearms, felonious assaults with a firearm, murders with a firearm. Table 2 provides us with information related to discharging firearms at another human being. Whether the person was in a car, in a public place, or in their homes. Since 2019, there have been close to 3,000 such incidents and many more who have been impacted by the events. Not just the victims or their families, not just the victims are impacted, but so are their families, their neighbors, and the entire neighborhood and this entire city. is impacted by these events. And then Table 3 enumerates the firearms APD officers have recovered since 2019. To date, APD officers have seized over 4,200 firearms in Akron. These seizures come from traffic stops, pursuits, warrants, drug raids, and other officer activities. We are witnessing a 33% decline in seized weapons thus far in 2023. The reasons are many, but we believe that one of the principal reasons is that the new gun law in Ohio has contributed to the number of weapons that we've seized. The next page is titled Shooting Victims Stats in 2020. The next 3 pages is 2020, 2021, 2022, and then currently 2023, so the next 4 pages. 4 pages in all. Since 2020, close to 700 people have been shot in Akron. 225 in 2020, 202 in 2021, 181 in 2022, and thus far in 2023, 73 people have been shot. The numbers are staggering and unacceptable. Tackling this issue remains a top priority for the Akron Police Department, but we can't do it by ourselves. Building the relationship with the Akron community, a relationship built on trust, is paramount. And I know as I get to the last tab on name tags, there is concern that the removal of the name tags has eroded that trust further. And I'll talk more about that when we get to tab 4. Sir, did you have a question?
Chief, yeah, I have a quick question. It jumps out, I think, as nobody would be surprised that there is a huge increase in shootings that occurred during the summer months, specifically July and August. I'm curious for the 2023 year what the force is going to be doing, if anything, differently in order to address this.
It's a great question because summers are usually the most active times. We're doing the best we can with the resources that we have. We're down 40 officers, staffing, officers are going call to call to call to call. One of the things that has been a challenge in this city, sir, is the level of cooperation that we get from victims, from neighbors because they're afraid, and from witnesses, again, out of fear. So our ability to identify the individuals that are committing these crimes, who I believe are probably less than, I don't know, 0.5% of this community. I think there are people who engage in this behavior that do it over and over and over again and probably have for the last 4 years. So one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to raise this issue to the community. Look, this past year has been very, very difficult for all of us. The shooting of Jalen Walker has rocked this community in ways that it wasn't prepared for, and I don't know any community can. Myself, Mayor Horrigan, and the entire city staff has been very, very respectful of the Walker family, and our condolences continue to go out to them because I don't know how you continue after you lose one of your children. And I'm very sincere about that. But one of the things that I have directed in order to give the public the ability to grieve and heal is for us to pull back a bit. Us to give space for the community to engage in protesting, to engage in those things that help in the healing process. We're at a point now where we're starting to re-engage, and we are developing a strategic plan on how to re-engage, and we're incorporating voices from the community leaders. And so to answer your question, what are we doing differently to address what we expect in July and August? We're working on it because it's such a complicated issue. There are so many things that are contributing to the gunfire in this city. But first and foremost, we got to bring people who are responsible for it to justice, hold people accountable, get them the help they need, get them out of some of the lives that they're living in, gang life and such. And the police department has a role to play in that, but so does this board, so does the city council, so does the mayor, so does community leaders, and every person who calls Akron home. So we're going to be looking for ways to partner with these different groups.
Chief, I have a question,
Yes,
please.
ma'am.
On your pie chart for 2019 up to 2022, Akron Police Department calls for service and use of force. The last pie chart under 2022 dispositions, where the majority of the pie chart, 56% are black males. Is that, I don't know, maybe, is anyone in your department studying, is it a certain neighborhood, or are there any demographics that are just particular to the reason why that part of that pie chart is so high?
Again, I think that and I thank you for asking that question. Again, I think the answer is difficult, and I think the issues that are leading to that are complicated. I can tell you, at least based on us, we investigate every use of force, and we go to the body camera footage to determine if there was any misconduct or if we miss an opportunity to de-escalate. Thus far, again, statistically, the numbers are insignificant when it comes to an officer acting out of policy. I mean, we're in the single digits, 1 or 2 per year. I think, well, and I want to be careful with what I say because I know it's a delicate issue. Trust in police, trust in the system, is lower in the African American community than it is elsewhere. At least that's my personal belief. And I've heard that from, different partners I have. People not following the orders and commands of a police officer, again, it may be multifaceted, the reasons why, but in the end, the officer has a job to do. And if a person has committed a crime or is suspected of a crime, they're going to effect an arrest. And what we're seeing, at least by the data, is that we're seeing more not acknowledging the officer's authority among this group. Again, it's multifaceted. It's, it all comes down to, a big part of it has to come down to trust and legitimacy. And while I think the police department historically has done a good job, a decent job, at least that's what I gathered when I got here. I started doing one-on-one interviews with different people from across the community, to include the black community, specifically the black community. I heard decent reports about the view of police. That changed on June 27th of last year, and it changed dramatically.
So last question then regarding this. I know you have periodic trainings for your officers. In those trainings, does anyone ask the officers outright, why do you think this group doesn't trust you? Just to see, what they think.
I can't answer that, adequately, but I know the whole topic of the way in which we interact with the community, the African American community, the new immigrant community, the Caucasian community, the entire community, that is discussed in in-service. It is discussed in the academy. It is discussed in roll call briefings, and those roll call briefings happen every day. Are we doing the best job that we can? I don't know the answer to that. I would probably say no, and we are always looking for new methods to instruct our officers, get different people in front of officers so they can understand. The cultural conversations is very, very important in policing today. But to answer your question directly, why is that demographic more represented? I don't know that I can answer it adequately right now. That's being studied across the country. And I could probably ask you all, and you could probably give me the reasons why. But at least what I have found in the last 2 years I've been here, there does not seem to be a concerted effort to target, to go after That has not been present. I have not seen it. If I did, that person would be gone. We have zero toleration for that in the Akron Police Department, so long as I'm chief. But training is very, very important, but also the trust. This board, I believe, has talked about officers and doing more things proactively in the community. Interacting with members of the community in a non-enforcement role. You're spot on. You're 100% spot on. We need to be doing that. The challenge is that our officers are going call to call to call. When you look at the calls for service and our staffing levels, for the beat officer, the officer that is working in neighborhood to actually get out and interact that way, and especially on the overnight hours, it's very difficult. Doesn't mean that we can't come up with some solution, but it's difficult. And it's in those interactions, and I can tell you, I spent 18 years in patrol, working graveyard patrol in Corpus Christi, Texas. I would interact during the daytime. I would come in for events, Juneteenth or wherever, and I would build those relationships at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then when I see somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning, we know each other. And there's more compliance, you build that relationship. I think that can be an answer to some of this. But again, I would say that the vast majority of our officers, if not all our officers, never want to go hands-on with somebody. Because when you do, you're scrutinized as a police officer to a very high level, and we should be. The chance and probability of an injury happening to the officer or the individual goes up. And then when force is used against us, it escalates quickly. And when I get to the shooting data, I'm going to say it now and I'll say it then. There is no officer that comes to work saying, I hope I get to shoot somebody. If anything, they're praying to God that they don't have to do it. Anyways.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you.
Chief Mylett, I have a quick question
Yes,
for
ma'am.
you. I imagine that the information that I'm going to ask is not contained in here, but would you happen to possess demographics of officers, also not just racial demographics, but how many live in this community? I think when we talk about building trust, a part of our relationship with Akron is homegrown, typically. It's when you walk the streets and you were educated in the schools that you can build a personal relationship not only with the city but with its citizens. So I'd be interested in seeing how many of the force that currently exists is from
Yes, ma'am.
Akron, and then also the demographics, female, race, so
Yes,
forth.
ma'am. I don't have that data now. I know it's lower than it has been historically, and Brian's been here for close to 30 years. The number of homegrown people, but then also officers living in the city. That number has dropped as well. Excuse me, but I'll get that data for you.
Chief Mylett, I have a question about, I want to say it's the Akron Police Department shooting victims for 2023. On the left-hand side, when it says the victims by age, the top line says other. Is that a mistake? And was that supposed to be 18 and younger? For that bar?
I think it's supposed to be 18 and other. Yeah, 18 and younger, because that's what it's depicted on the other pages. So that's probably just a typo.
Okay. Another question, I think going back to the point about some of the relationship building and the possibilities, how do you see the possible use of your resource officers that are in the high schools and middle schools and elementary schools? In the summer, going back to Mr. Acosta's point, we look at some of the data for June, July, and August. How are those resource officers utilized in the summer? Is there any way that they could be, because they are in the schools, they know some of the young people there, but also they're in those, if you will, school communities, how could they be utilized within that community still, even though there's not school? Has that been a point of discussion within your police department of, what are we going to do with them now that they're not in school, but they can continue to be, if you will, relationship builders throughout the course of the summer to hopefully kind of eliminate some of these numbers as far as that 18 and under perspectives. I mean, if I look at 2023, it's at 35 right now. And so, you know, has any of that been talked about internally?
It has. When the SROs, the school resource officers, go into the summer break, it's actually, for a lot of them, it's their only opportunity to take vacation. So some of them are gone for 2 weeks, for a month. And Brian, then we're looking at placing them in different positions within the department. You want to comment on that?
So we only have, there's roughly 13 or 14 officers in fact, we don't have them in the elementary schools. They go back, some go back to shifts, some go back to backfill, others, like we have some in our juvenile, one specific in our juvenile unit, so he's out kind of working with those cases as well. So we do look at backfilling where we have that need, but also just backfilling patrol as well. Because again, summer's prime time for vacation with staffing, so most of them go back to patrol shifts.
Okay, because it seems like it might be even if they do go back to patrol, is there any way we can get them patrolling where they were at as far as some of the schools?
We try to be purposeful in that regard, yes. The same districts that they work at or the sector that they're in, yes.
All right.
That's something our zone commanders try to do.
Well, that's a great idea. It is, and I appreciate the input. And we will go back, look at what we're doing, and see if we can't build upon what we've been doing. But I will tell you this, that when we have issues with students in neighborhoods, we do reach out to the SRO, whether they're in an assignment inside the station or somewhere else, to get more information. And if we can leverage that relationship, the SRO will step forward and help us. Again, Mr. Chair, it's relationships, right? It all comes down to that. I'm gonna go back to my script real quick, if it's okay. If you turn to the page that says Akron Police Department, it's under tab 3, Akron Police Department homicide stats. In 2019, 187 people were the victims of homicide in the city of Akron. The loss of human life, again, is staggering and unacceptable. I'm sorry, since 2019, 187 people were the victims of homicide. The numbers are unacceptable. It's especially for a city our size. I'm convinced if it weren't for the quick actions of Akron Police Department employees, officers at the scene, at shooting scenes, who stopped the bleeding by use of tourniquets, pressure points, whatever, until the medics can get there, that contributes to that number not being higher. Our firefighters are phenomenal when it comes to providing triage to the patient before we are able to get them to what I consider world-class emergency rooms. Those three things, I think, contribute to that number, 187, not being higher. Since 2019, 11,000 shots fired calls, and again, these aren't trigger pulls. 3,000 people shot. 3,000 people shot at, I'm sorry, and since 2020, 700 people actually were shot in the city of Akron. These numbers include victims that we should never forget. Every one of them was loved by somebody. But certainly, when you think of the innocent children who were taken from us by senseless violence, well, it makes the issue even more egregious and worse. Children like 4-year-old Journey Tolbert, who was shot in the face last summer while at a family gathering and lost her life. 8-year-old Michaela Pickett, who in 2020 was caught in crossfire between two groups at a neighborhood party and was shot and killed. And 1-year-old Tyree Halsell, who was shot during a family disturbance in 2020. I will say their names each and every time because we can't forget these victims. Collectively, as a community, we must work together to change our situation. I am an Akron resident. I have skin in this game, not only as your chief of police, but as an Akron resident. I don't want to see another loss of human life in our city. When you think about the victims of these crimes, not only do you have the person that has lost their life, you have the person who did it that's going to prison for a long time. And then you think about the family members of both. and the loss there, the tentacles go out and it's a ripple effect, not to mention the destabilization of our community. So the next section discusses every officer-involved shooting, and the title is Officer-Involved Shooting Data January 1, 2018 through June 14th today, 2023. Among other data, this document contains a synopsis of the event. I'm not going to pontificate on it or anything else. I'll ask you, and I would encourage you all to read this document and draw your own conclusions. But I will say this. I've been a police officer for 34 years. If you include my military service as a police officer, it's 38. I've served in 3 states, and I can assure you, again, I've never met a single officer who says, I hope I get to go to work today and shoot somebody. It's not the thing that any officer wants. I will note also that we have not had an officer-involved shooting in 2023. That doesn't mean that officers have not been put in positions where deadly force would have been authorized, because I can assure you that has occurred. But they do all they can to de-escalate the situation and resolve the incident without any use of force. If you go to tab 4, it says social media threat profile. I'm moving into the issue of name tags. I know this board has questions about the removal of name tags from officers' uniforms, and again, I know Deputy Mayor Tucker was here last week, and he did a good job explaining a lot of this, but I figured it would be better just hearing from the horse's mouth directly. And this is where I'm going to go off script. I come from a generation of police officer that if an officer is involved in a shooting, not only does their name go out, but so does their picture. Over the last 10 years in this country, we've witnessed a shift towards ambushes of officers, assassinations of officers, on duty and off duty for actions that they took while on duty. The alerts that we get from the FBI and other organizations about threat levels is consistent. We have a duty, I believe, we have a duty and responsibility to protect the community of Akron, the public, anybody that lives here, has traveled through here, or is doing business here. That is my primary goal and responsibility, is to provide for the safety and security of Akron. But it's also my responsibility and our responsibility to do all we can to protect those men and women that are coming here to serve, to respond to the 11,000 shots fired calls, all the homicides, all the shooting victims. And we're not even talking about sexual assaults and child abuse and everything else. We have a duty and responsibility, in my humble opinion, to protect them. When this incident happened, when this tragic incident happened, threats started coming almost immediately. We received a alert from the FBI that there were 2 extreme violent extremist groups in the United States that put bounties out on the officers' heads, all Akron police officers. And they said the threats were credible. It is not in here because the FBI asked me not to put it in here. But we had it. We shared it with the media back when all this was going on, and you know, the threat was real and continues to be real. But I didn't take the name tags off. I didn't take the name tags off yet. We had an unlawful assembly in front of our station. Officers went, they effected arrests, there was resistance, there was use of force, and one of the people in the crowd got the name off the officer's nameplate. And it was a sergeant. And that sergeant, the next day or the day after, his picture was up on social media, so was his wife's picture, their wedding picture, their marriage certificate, and other personal identifiers. Then the house and the address. Then another sergeant that was at the scene, same thing happened to him. And the request was made of me, Chief, until this settles down, can we take the name tags off? I said, absolutely yes. Yes. But what we need to make sure that the public can identify our officers. This is a name tag. Officers are silver, supervisors are gold. This is the ID number. It's the same size, same color, and I'll pass this around so you all can see. The only condition that I said that I would agree to this is we put the name, the ID numbers on the uniform. Now, we didn't invent this wheel. I called the Cleveland chief, and I asked him, I said, what are your thoughts on this? He goes, Chief, we made this move 8 years ago, 8 or more years ago. I said, did you get any issues from the public? He goes, absolutely not. Have you had problems with people who want to complain on officers, identifying the officers? He said, no. I said, okay. Buffalo, New York, and again, at the very far back on tab 5, we list the different departments that had, and this was just a real quick internet search, the different departments that have allowed officers to remove their name tags or allow them to do it in certain circumstances. So, when those two sergeants' images appeared on these websites in connection with the threats that you will see in the following pages, I had a duty and responsibility to protect your police officers and their families. What I told groups in the city, as I explained the reason why, and we did media over this, we did our best to educate the public, I said this was not in perpetuity. We would be bringing back the name tags. Just as soon as the threats stop, I'll do it. But as you will see in this, the threats haven't stopped. It's been consistent up to and including the last few days. If you go to, and I won't bore you with every single one of these, but at the front page here, it says the redactions on the following pages were made at the request of the employee. The redactions contain personal information of the employee's spouse, children, parents, siblings, and extended family. They also cover the faces of the employee, his wife, and his children. The author of the posts included pictures of the officer, his wife, and children, and provided others with information on how to locate the officer and his family. Not only did they provide the personal data, but they put aerial photos of some of the officers' homes and their address. And the rhetoric that was accompanying these things is, go get them. You will also see threats in here saying, okay, what are we going to do? Set them up, ambush them. If you turn to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about the 11th page in, you will see a picture of a bottle. It's this picture right here. On April 18th of this year, an individual posted on the mayor's Twitter page the directions on how to put together a homemade incendiary weapon. They take bottles, fill it up with different liquids. And I witnessed this in Seattle during the George Floyd riots. Sometimes they put gas in there, they put a wick, and they make a Molotov cocktail. In this particular case, it's calling for, different objects to irritate the officer, disable the officer. So when you started seeing those bottles being thrown on Copley Road a few weeks back, you have to understand the officers know this, and they have no idea what's coming at them. And in part, that's a reason why the officers responded as quickly as they did for their safety. If you turn to 1, 2, this page here. It's about 4 pages up. Four pages up from the incendiary weapons. Behind the redacted portions, and it's all redacted, I wish I could show you the unredacted, because what you're going to see is information pertaining to the employee, his wife, his mother, his father, his children, his grandparents, his extended family, cousins, and friends. The next page. Underneath those redactions are pictures of faces of these individuals, officers and their families. About 3 pages up, you'll see this one with emojis over the kids' faces. I won't go through every single one of these threats, and I'm not going to use the vulgarities in this setting, what's in here, but I encourage you and I would ask you to please look through this entire document. This is why I have not brought back the name tags. As I balance the needs of the community and the desires of the community and the officer's safety and their family, removal of this and replacing it with the identifying number that identifies them. Captain McCosey's badge is on there. For somebody to remember how to spell McCosey as opposed to ID 1062, it's a whole lot easier to identify Captain McCosey by 1062. Deputy Mayor Tucker talked about officers on our department with similar last names. I think we have 5 K. Williams in our police department, but there's only one ID 1062. The other thing, and ma'am, before I go, officers that wear ball caps, also on the back of their hat is their ID number. Officers that are in patrol cars and they come up to somebody's home, we can identify the officer by their ID number, by the car number, and if somebody has a complaint, all they have to say is at 10 o'clock last night, officers came to my house, this is my address, they were rude. We go to the call, we pull up the body cam, and we can identify who the officer is. We have not had an issue, and I checked with our IA department this morning, we have not had a single issue of an officer not being able to be identified. Now you gotta also consider in 2023 thus far, we've only had 12 complaints as of today.
Chief, I have just 2 quick questions. You know, assuming that everyone may not be right up on a police officer to see these numbers, has anyone thought about making the numbers spread across the entire badge? You know, larger, that way you can see the number if you're a little ways away from it. And then the other question is, if not, is there like a backup plan where maybe they can take cards with them if someone says, I can't see your number, do you have a card? Are you planning to give them cards?
We can look at that, and I know some officers do carry business cards.
Okay.
And I also need to clarify, not every officer has opted to go to the name tag. I think the vast majority of patrol officers do, but there are officers that wear this style of nameplate, and if I can, again, I'll ask you, which is easier to see and identify? The nameplate or this?
Just the issue too, a lot of these stops take place at night. So we're thinking in terms of, is that visible at night? And maybe you want to think in terms of adding, you know, that thing where you can, the light reflective, some kind of reflective material where you can see that, because otherwise you're lost.
The only challenge with coming up with some sort of reflection is that that can be a target on the officer.
Could be, yeah.
And so we consider all the shots fired call and everything else.
I mean, like, say for example, a traffic stop or something like that, and then you're leaving and you know, may not be able to see those numbers, but you can always see the,
And all you have to do is ask, who are you? And officers will tell them who they are.
Mm.
They will tell them who they are.
They should.
They may not use their last name, but they say, I need 1036. And if a member of the community says, you know what, that's not good enough, I want to talk to a supervisor, the supervisor will ask. Again, putting this in context, in 2023, 12 complaints. 12.
Well, I want to
Chief,
say,
sorry, go ahead. Really quick, I just want to say, to your point, we have had at least one complaint that came to us and that an officer refused to give any identifying information.
If you can get me the details, if an officer does that, they will be disciplined. I had one officer do it last year, I think it was, and that officer was disciplined. If a member of the community wants an identifier of the officer, at a minimum, they have to give their ID number. And again, that ID number is unique to the individual. So if the person says, I want to complain on K. Williams, and I'm not going to say the officer's name, but I got 5, but there's only one ID number 1062. And again, folks, and I would ask you all from your seats, if you can help us stop these threats, I will bring back the name tags quickly. Yes, ma'am.
well, first I want to say the threats are very chilling to me, chilling and disturbing, very much so. And I do hope that they start to subside over time, but I think in order for that to happen, there needs to be more engagement with the community by the police. I think that you might want to consider having a training on trust, just strictly on trust. There are all kinds of professionals out here who can give trainings like that. Maybe they'll get some insight on how they can get the community to trust them, how they can get the black males with that large part of that pie chart to trust them more. But it's going to have to be a collaborative effort,
Yes,
for
ma'am.
sure. But I'm sorry about the threats. They are very disturbing to me. I got butterflies in my stomach reading some of these.
I mean, you think about if this was your son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter.
Sure.
And then your grandchildren impacted by it as well. We've lost, that one officer, the initial officer I told you about, he left the department, and he had about 12, 13 years on. We invested a lot of money in him, and he was one of our best. But his family was concerned, and we have seen officers leave the department because of a narrative that has been told about this police department. Again, we are not perfect. And folks, I didn't come up in the APD, okay? And if I saw stuff that was consistent with what I'm hearing and reading on social media, I would make sweeping changes in this organization. What I've witnessed firsthand in the field, because especially early when I got here, I was out and working with the officers frequently, I saw nothing but professionalism. And the numbers reflect that, at least again, in my humble opinion. Are there people out there that are dissatisfied with the level of service we provide? I have no doubt. Are there people who are not going to complain? I have no doubt. But I can't do anything about it unless I know about it. And when we do know about it, and Brian could talk about, if you would like, or we can, save it for another time, the process we go through to investigate every complaint is arduous. The process we follow to investigate every use of force, every pursuit, is arduous. So by the time it reaches me, it has been thoroughly vetted. And where the officer has engaged in misconduct, that case is so tight that, the decision for me is easy. Fortunately, we haven't had many of those. certainly since I've been here.
Chief Mylett, I want to ask two questions. Two I think are significant based on the fact of what took place last summer with Jalen Walker, and I know this was brought up, and as we as a board continue to look into some of the policies and procedures of our police department, has there been any internal discussion about the pursuit policy and what that looks like and possibly reforming that?
Yes, sir. Absolutely, there has.
To what extent? What does that look like as far as your all's discussion?
So I'm not ready to tell this board what changes will occur because I need to tell my employees first. But I've listened to the community. I've heard the discussions in here in City Council. Some of you here have shared information with me about your concerns. Based on that and also input I receive from our officers and looking at what is best practice across the policing profession, we are making some adjustments to the pursuit policy. Again, I'm not ready to reveal those yet. I haven't even briefed the mayor yet. So I'm anticipating by the end of June to have a new pursuit policy. Now, if I might, and I feel like I have to say this. Again, what happened June 27th last year and the loss of Jalen Walker's life is tragic. It's tragic. His life was young. He was in pain. Everybody connected to that loss, no more so than the Walker family, Mrs. Walker. But this has impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, to include these officers, every officer that's in this police department. When I go back and I review the investigation conducted by BCI, and you've all heard this before, that was the first time in the history of this police department that we went outside, and it was the right thing to do. We had an independent third party investigate it. The prosecutor in Summit County said, I'm recusing myself. I don't want any appearance of impropriety here or anything. So she asked the Attorney General to take lead, and he did, the highest law enforcement officer in the state. They did their investigation. They convened a special grand jury that was diverse. They presented all the facts and evidence, and they made the decisions and conclusions that they made. Again, I understand people disagree, and I respect people's opinions. But one thing that was clear was that this traffic stop escalated within 26 seconds. And if we go and try to make a traffic stop and somebody shoots at us, we're going to chase them. There will be a pursuit. So the connection of our change in policy to that event, that is not the cause for this. I will tell you what we did change as a result of that. And it was the calls that we heard from the community was handcuffing and keeping somebody handcuffed when they're no longer a threat. So I made that change about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Fortunately, we haven't had an officer-involved shooting. And so, but that is something that is directly connected to that shooting. We're looking at our tactics. We're reviewing our performance. We have an internal investigation that is getting close to completion. It's going to take me a while to go through it, but I will report out once it's concluded. But to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, yes, we are making some adjustments to the policy.
Chief Mylett, we have many on our board that have worked and served in the mental health community. And I know just in looking at other cities and some of the things that are going on and how they're responding to maybe possibly some of the mental health needs of our community as we continue to talk about. What does that look like from our police department as maybe forming or having some type of mental health response team that are with our police officers or first responders? What is that? Is that something that has been discussed or talked about, especially because mental health right now is such at I think, at a high clip within our community.
Absolutely, and the discussions actually predate my arrival here. Former Deputy Mayor Brown was leading that discussion at the direction of the mayor. It is something that we've been exploring with our partners in Akron. I will tell you that where I came from before here, the Bellevue Police Department, we put together a co-responder unit. We saw a 33% reduction in incarceration. We saw a 33% reduction in uses of force, and it was successful. We talked to the people, that the clients, they were very happy. Again, it goes to them knowing the officer. We're going to replicate something like that here. I'm anticipating once this academy class graduates, again, it's a staffing issue, and it has been, but once we graduate this academy class, so long as we don't have a mass exodus of officers, partnering with the fire department, Fire Chief Nacko has also taken a lead on this. We're looking to partner with the fire department and the mental health professionals to come up with a co-responder team. So when we have somebody that's in crisis, it's that team that's going to respond, if they're available. And as you all know, especially those of you who are in the mental health profession, we're oftentimes dealing with the same person in crisis, and that relationship can truly help de-escalate.
Before you go, Chief Mylett,
Mr. Chairman, I also have some questions. I've been taking notes, and I do have some.
Well, go ahead.
I was just waiting. If you're
Yeah,
done
go ahead.
with your questions.
I can save my statement to the end.
Well, if it's a statement, okay.
Yep.
Chief, you kind of alluded to this towards the end in what you were saying about understanding that there may be people out in the community who simply have not complained for whatever reasons. Could well be because they wouldn't believe their complaint would be processed fairly. Do you have any form of, I don't want to say data, but has the force looked at all in trying to actually determine what the number of, I'm going to call them unmade complaints is out there? I know it's a hard thing to do, but have you looked at that issue?
It's a difficult one because I don't know how you quantify it. You know, we do our best to communicate information out on how to complain. During the protests, we did multiple community presentations on know your rights as a protester, but if this is the complaint process. We put that out into the media, it's on our website. But to go and capture information on people who are not satisfied with our performance or want to complain that didn't, you know, we have our surveys that we use. It's just, if you have a recommendation, I'm all ears on how to do that.
Well, we may find it out.
Okay.
You know, we're beginning to get a flow of complaints. You know, we're you know, I think a number of people have said, you know, we're building the airplane while we're trying to get it to take off.
And I want to be a partner in that.
Well, I'm glad of that. But I mean, we're beginning to see a flow of complaints, both coming in, you know, to our office, but also, frankly, people coming to our meetings. And I suspect we're going to get a sense of that as long as we're able to be trusted, you know, by the community. We may begin to get a sense of the unmade complaints that aren't made because of lack of confidence
Sure.
that there's any point in complaining. But I wanted to find out whether the force has, in any fashion, tried to look at that. And I understand there's a lot else to do, but I didn't want to fail to ask the question.
If I can also say, even if we doubled the numbers than what we already have, or even triple them, it's still the number of complaints that we receive compared to the interactions that we have with the public is still extremely low. But we would look for patterns. Are we getting more rudeness complaints during this time period or on this particular shift? And then digging deeper into it. So yes, as you build your airplane on this police department stands ready as a partner. And if there's recommendations that come out to where we can capture that, I'm all ears. And we will actionalize these recommendations.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure that's a part of what we're going to be doing. Of course, the charter requires us to be looking at how the division operates and make recommendations, and we certainly will be doing that. Concerning the body cams, am I right that approximately half the force has body cams?
All of patrol
Yes.
does. Detectives do not. I think it's a very patrol-centered.
And is that about, I'm going back to the training, Deputy Chief, about half of the force?
About, yeah, I would say so.
Now, do you have, just ask the question, I mean, do you get complaints, or are there use of force incidents involving other than patrol?
Yes.
And actually, this goes to one of the questions I noted here. Do you know offhand what approximately is the percentage of complaints / use of force incidents, that is, matters that warrant investigation, that involve patrol versus non-patrol?
The vast majority come from patrol, and we investigate every use of force. Doesn't matter if it's a specialized unit, a detective, or even a civilian, and that hasn't happened, but doesn't matter where the use of force happens, we investigate the incident. And fortunately, it's infrequent that a use of force occurs outside of the patrol role, but Brian, please.
For use of force, that would be 98% patrol.
Patrol,
98%
all right.
patrol. We may get 2 street narcotics. I don't know that we've had one from the record as active.
And when you look at the data, most of our uses of force are taking people to the ground and handcuffing them. The use of deadly force is, again,
So if I'm understanding this right, does that mean the vast majority of incident investigations, there is body cam data available?
yes, sir.
Okay. Concerning the threats, and you know, the point was well made. I mean, I think we all took it, and Ms. Anichevitz, of course, expressed it for all of us. What I want to know, though, have there been, I'll ask it 2 ways. Have there been, first of all, actions that have been reported that have been taken against officers or their families during this time period?
Brian?
There's been a few of those incidents where we've been directly confronted with people, and those have been investigated. Some of the other ones, they've just been the threats, and we've looked into a few of them, but so far there's been no criminal charges.
Well, aside from criminal charges, but I mean, roughly how many what were determined to be actions that were being taken? And let me extend it, actions either taken or credibly threatened actions, as opposed to just something posted. That is, somebody on the street, what it might be.
From people posting, or just?
Anybody.
Well, not in there, we do get additional threats where officers will be dealing with somebody and get additional threats.
The question then is, I mean, roughly, can you estimate how many either actions or what I'd call credible threats that go beyond just social media postings have there been?
What would your definition be of credible threat?
Well, it's kind of looking at the legal standard. In other words, the officer or a family member finds himself in a situation, not seeing a social media post, but a situation where they feel threatened, where they feel that the use of force may really happen.
We not captured in that. We do have officers that have been assaulted. We've had officers that.
Are we talking dozens?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Roughly how many?
A couple every year that we get where officers get assaulted as well.
But
Something under a dozen a year, and during this time period we're concerned about, is it stayed about the same?
Yes, I'm not aware of a.
But if I might also, you know, the officers off duty are not waiting for somebody to come, and I can tell you directly, officers have sold their homes because of the threats. They've removed their kids from schools. They've relocated either permanently or temporarily because of the threats. The disruption to their lives was significant. Fortunately, we have not experienced what we're seeing in New York and other cities where officers are sitting in their car and somebody comes up and shoots and assassinates them. Does that mean it won't happen here in Akron? No. Pray to God that it doesn't. But we have to take each one of these threats, especially collectively, as credible, especially when we're getting information from the FBI and other
Have you
sources.
seen a diminution in I'll call it threat activity, since the option of no name tag was made
No,
available?
we haven't seen any correlation between the two. It was very heavy immediately after June 27th. It continued through the summer. It kind of started easing up a little bit in the winter, and it got reignited after the grand jury's decision.
And looking, I mean, and I appreciate the data that you went and got concerning other communities. Has the issue been studied, and is there research that shows that, I'm going to say removing name tags, does reduce the threat activity?
I'm not aware of any, but I can reach out to the Police Executive Research Forum, who's the largest think tank in law enforcement globally, and ask them if there's been any empirical studies done.
It'd be interesting to know.
Sure.
I mean, I can understand the subjective reasons for making the change, but it also makes a difference if there's an objective basis for making the change versus there isn't.
Sure.
Kind of going to a little bit more, a little broader. I'm going to ask it this way. It's a little bit of an unfair way to ask it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm kind of taking away from your comments tonight in both the words you've said and also the intangibles of how you've presented tonight. And so my question is going to be, am I correctly understanding or not? Because my takeaway has been that you have seen, and as we sit tonight, do not see any need for substantial changes in how the Division of Police operates.
No, I didn't say, and if I conveyed that, I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I wanted to make sure
Okay.
I understood it.
So there is a lot of room for improvement in many different ways. I do think this is an exceptional police department. It's a good police department. It's not great. I think, and I'll do a presentation at some point in the future. I developed a program called the Tomorrow's Program. Overall, there's 3 different pillars: community engagement, process improvement, and officer wellness, development, and recognition. We were just starting to get moving on this when the shooting happened, and it kind of put the brakes on it. In those pillars, just by the different actions that we have in there and the programs within the program, it's going to continue to move the Akron Police Department to a level of professionalism that we all want. Again, I'm not saying it's not a professional police department, I do think it is, but there's always room for improvement.
And would you call that, would you say there's a need for substantial improvement?
Again, that's a subjective term, substantial. So if you can kind of tell me what you mean by substantial.
I think you and I can. I'm going to trust your
I'll put it
own
this way.
internal.
Do I think the Akron Police Department is a corrupt police department? Absolutely not. Do I think that the Akron Police Department is the way in which it's been described over the last year, I think is inaccurate. Do I think the Akron Police Department can improve in certain areas? Absolutely. The whole idea of cultural conversations, implicit bias, certainly we can always continue to build on that. And then looking at the structure of the police department, I think there's improvements that could be made there. But overall, substantial change because of corruption and no, I don't think that.
Corruption or just not doing the job like you would expect it to be done.
No, again, look at the data.
But
So that tells me our officers are doing the right thing when they are called upon to serve. Whether it's a 911 call or it's a proactive contact or it's a casual contact with a citizen. Go ahead.
Apart from incidents that might, give rise to a complaint, in terms of how the job's being done, and I appreciate seeing these awful statistics about shootings, but just in the way the force is doing its job, is there need for improvement, substantial improvement, very little improvement?
When you ask me that question, what's coming to mind is our solve rate with homicides, our solve rate with crimes.
Right.
And that starts with the dispatcher or the call taker taking the call, dispatcher dispatching it, officers getting there, crime scene arriving, and getting everything in order for the detective to get there, and then the detective doing their work. And our solve rate is very, very high compared to other departments. So in terms of performance and doing what the public is asking us to do, to serve and protect, I think our officers are doing a good job. Now, are there, again, is there growth opportunities? Absolutely. There's growth opportunities for me. I'm constantly interacting with chiefs from around the country, and I'm ripping them off with programs they have or training programs they have. So there's always, and it's going to be perpetual, it's going to be constant. But I think overall, this police department is doing a good job. And again, that's just not Steve Mylett's opinion. It's reflected, I believe, in the data.
And again, kind of back to the theme of improvement, or change, if change is needed. In your view, is there change needed in the manner in which complaints and incidents of use of force and so on are being done?
There is nothing that is coming to my mind that would substantially improve our system the way it is. Now, you pointed out capturing the complaints from those that are not going to complain because they don't trust the system or they don't feel like it's worth it or anything else. That you've intrigued me with that, and I'm gonna look at how other departments are doing it. But in terms of the way in which people can complain, they can complain to internal affairs. They can complain to supervisors. We've had a police auditor for 15 years. They can complain through the police auditor. Now they can complain through the Oversight Board. There's multiple ways for people to communicate their dissatisfaction with our service. But again, even if we tripled our numbers, it's still very low. But that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. I don't think we would ever achieve zero, but certainly I want to continue to reduce that number.
And you alluded to this, certainly, of course, this board, probably its primary purpose is to, in general, improve policing and the perception of policing, in Akron. And I assume we're right in the middle of deciding, what's the scope of our authority, how should we function. So not the part of help with community perception part, okay, or reduction of the folks that are threatening officers. But in terms of the process of how the department operates, are there ways in which you, as of tonight, think that this board can and should be helpful?
I am very grateful that we move forward with the development of the Oversight Board. I think the potential to really make a significant difference in the relationship between the community and the police department is high. But I'm not going to get into what I think that you all should be doing. Right. I think the charter outlines that, and then it's for you all to decide. But no matter what you decide, I assure you that you will have nothing but cooperation from this police department.
And hopefully, as we go down the line, we'll get more, whether it's from you, whether it's from deputy chief, whoever, because we need to know the ways in which you all think we can be helpful. That's you know better than anyone what we can usefully do in terms of the internal assistance. But the one thing I would ask you to consider: hold us accountable when we mess up, and I will be here and I will accept the responsibility. But I would also humbly ask you all to tell the story of this police department as you come to know us better and we get to know you better. But the data, we're data driven, and policing has become a data driven institution. To share some people's misconception of who we are. I've heard it, and I heard it tonight, that we're abusive and going out and assaulting people and everything else. The data doesn't reflect that.
I know it feels that way, and I also recognize that when something happens in Memphis, or here in Akron, or anywhere else, we're all tagged by it. But I promise you, the leadership of this organization is very, very hyper-vigilant to the professionalism and maintaining the professionalism.
And we appreciate that, and we're seeing it more and more. We have to do an annual report that's required of us, and I think every one of us wants it to be a full and balanced report, and hopefully we'll do that job well. I've got just a couple of the kind of deep, smaller items.
Sure.
One thing, talking about the Walker grand jury, well, I don't want to ask it as a question, but I mean, you know, as we all who are involved in the criminal justice system know, that we do not know what the vote was of that grand jury on the potential charges. And that in reality, all we know from the no bill decision is that they did not have 7 votes to indict on any of the charges. So it is entirely possible that a majority of that grand jury was prepared to indict on 1 or more charges. I mean, that's your understanding, right?
Go ahead.
Sure. All we know when there's a no bill is that they didn't have 7 votes.
Well, then, if they didn't have a majority then,
No, it has to be a supermajority.
you would speculate anyway. Grand jury's a secret, so even that question is very speculative, and you will never know that.
Yeah, all right, I'm just going to say it, Gert. The grand jury, and I think even in the data here, it's depicted that the grand jury exonerated the officers. That's, in my mind, not accurate. Gert, I want to finish. All it means is that there was not the requisite majority to indict. And I think it's not been helpful that the significance of the no bill decision has been represented as meaning more than it means. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I do have another question for the chief, please.
Hold on 1 second.
I don't really want to dialogue with Ms. Wilms.
Okay, but hold on, Mr. Gibbon. Mr. Costa's been waiting patiently to ask a question.
Oh.
I want to give him an opportunity.
I'm sorry.
And Brandon, I wanted to get back to you on your question about the July-August with an increase in violence. There's an alternative path to police as well. Danico Buckley White Knight is our youth violence, I forget the name, we've changed it a couple of times, the youth opportunity coordinator. And he has worked with a lot of community groups. A new strategic plan has been put out there. I emailed it to everybody. If you'd like Danico to come and present on that plan, that's an opportunity for this group too. Don't hesitate to let me know. But I emailed you all that information. There was a health equity probably 3-4 weeks ago where it was presented. Violence interrupters, all those different opportunities that they're looking at. But I would encourage you all to look at the plan and then invite Danico to come join this group for what he's doing, how he's partnering with a lot of groups in the community for that as well.
Thank you. I know a couple of others have questions too, so I'll be super quick. Chief, thanks for being here this evening. I wanted to raise your attention to a study that was released by Stanford, which concluded that the first 27 seconds in interacting with an officer can have a huge income on the outcome.
I saw that.
Oh, okay, awesome. My second question was, I noticed that these threats that were made against the Akron Police Department are quite detailed, these screenshots that you have here. I guess I'm just curious, what is being done? Like, are these individuals who made these comments being tracked internally? How did y'all identify these comments? Because I noticed that some of the screenshots are even like deep within conversational threads. So I guess I'm just curious how y'all obtained some of this
All of it
information.
is open source material on social media. We are monitoring social media and have been for quite a while, and it's part of our job. In terms of investigating, yes, we have taken the more serious threats against our officers, and we've investigated those. I'm not prepared to tell you where we are in those investigations, but I assure you that if we're able to identify somebody, we will use the criminal justice system to ensure that that person is brought to justice as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing up, when you're up here and you're in the moment, I forget that we're one lane. in the city, again, with Gert and the mayor and many others, the police have a part to play, but so does a lot of other people. Danico's doing an outstanding job. And as Gert was speaking, I was reminded that just today, members of our police department, Lieutenant Miller and others, sat down with the interrupters, the violence interrupter groups, and trying to talk about how we can address this issue as we are approaching the summer months. So I'm not sure I gave you a very good answer, sir, but there's a lot of things that are going on to try and get that number down. We're on track right now to have one of the lower years of violence in our city in terms of homicides, and we want to maintain that. But I am worried about the summer. Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Sir, just a quick question. You had said that the police conduct a survey, correct?
The city conducts a survey.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I thought you said the police department.
So the city, and there's police-related questions within the survey that pertain only to us. So within that survey, and I think there's one going on right now, correct?
Yeah, we have actually partnered with, it was part of the racial, social justice task force that we start doing.
Right,
Yeah.
I know that's going on, but
Yeah.
I understood him to say that the police conduct a survey, so the answer to that is no.
The police in the past have done independent surveys.
Right.
And the response is low, really low. So again, when the chief says, help us get the word out, when we get another survey out with regards to the police and the community's perception, feedback, anything they'd like to weigh in, we'd ask you to help us get that word out, so we can definitely take that information and get it to a much broader audience. Thanks.
I just have one thing. Chief, I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Very much. And I just have a suggestion or
Yes, ma'am.
request. As long as the name is on this tab, I personally would like to see the numbers to be just as long, to just span the entire tab.
Okay.
That's what I would like to see. And again, I'm sorry for the threats. I wish you all well. My prayers would be with everyone's safety. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very, very much.
If there weren't any other questions, I did have one more, Mr. Chairman. Did anyone else have questions?
I'm going to say what I said last week. You weren't here. I like to keep it simple. You were stating that everything is data-driven. I would like to see the police department become more personal. Let's get away from the numbers, because everybody doesn't understand it. You know, these numbers here, I understand it. I think we understand it. But the community, they don't understand it. It's like talking four languages to them. I think we need to get more personal with the community. There needs to be more communication between the police and the citizens. And when we have a problem on that pie graph with the black community, I feel it's the way they perceive the police, how they talk to them. And if you talk to a black man in a certain way, he feels a certain kind of way, like you're talking at him versus to him. So he's going to react a certain kind of way. And the police officer isn't ready for that. He may think that's a form of being
Challenging?
exactly, and then it's going to escalate.
Yes, sir.
I was a police officer for 21 years down in Kansas, so.
So you know what you're talking about.
You know, we had a CIT team, so anytime we had a mental health issue,
Right.
a CIT team go out and they handle all our mental health calls.
Yes, sir.
I think along with the education, communication comes to education. And that's, I'm going to blame the police and the citizens, because we're both at fault. We
You've walked in those shoes, absolutely.
On both sides. People look at the police in a funny kind of way because I don't think they hate the police. I think they hate the uniform. It's what the uniform stands for. They don't like that uniform. I know when I was in that uniform, they didn't hate me, they hated the uniform. It wasn't the color of my skin. And they would tell me, I don't like your uniform. I don't like that uniform here. And I disrespect it because you have bad apples
Yep.
that we both know are enemies.
Yes, sir.
And it's unfortunate because they make us look bad.
Absolutely.
And what I said last week is I take offense when I hear anybody talking bad about the police because I wore the badge proudly for 21 years. And if I didn't know how to help somebody, I would go out and find the help. If I couldn't find it, I would tell you I can't help. It has a lot to do with how they carry themselves. I've seen some officers, not now, but in the past, I had problems with Akron police when I was a Canton police officer. I was profiled. I had officers ask me, "What are you doing here? You're out of your jurisdiction." I had officers profile my brother, give my mom a hard time, and I would listen to this, but at that particular time in my career, I only saw it through the police officer. And now, years later, I can understand why my family felt the way they do or did. I don't like when I hear people tell their children not to
Man.
speak to the police. I don't like that. And I hear that even now. If I'm in a store, you better not do wrong. You see that cop right there, I'm gonna have to arrest you.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to put your hand up.
That's right.
I believe that's the worst thing you can tell your child.
Yes.
Because you're starting them out at a young age doing something bad. You're poisoning their mind. They're gonna grow up and they're not gonna like it for it because that parent had a problem with us or with you.
Agreed.
Me or the police in general. So they're gonna pass that poison on to an innocent child. So when that child grows up through the ranks, that child, all he or she knows is what mom or dad has told them. So they process that. So they grow up thinking, well, police are no good. I don't like you.
Right.
You're the protocol.
That's right.
You know, I don't like you, period. I don't have to listen to you. We need to stop that poison. We gotta stop it. We gotta catch these kids when they're little. And it all, again, education. We both were involved in this because we have to understand the community. And we have to teach them and educate them so they understand why we do the things we do. Vice versa. We have to understand the community, why they act the way they do. Because if I have a crime or something that happens to me or my family or my property, and I call you and I'm talking to you, and you're sitting there like you don't care, and I'm looking at you, and you're just, okay, whatever, and you give me some kind of attitude, I'm gonna shut down and automatically I'm gonna think, well, you know, just get out of here. I don't wanna talk to you. And then it's gonna escalate. And now you're gonna get me on disorderly conduct. I'm going to jail for something that I should have been in jail for, but it's both of our faults because we have 2 ears and we have them for a reason. We have to listen. And that's our problem. We don't listen to one another. I'm a police officer, I have a badge, and I have a gun, you're gonna listen to me, I'm the representative of authority. You sit there and listen and be quiet. I'm not gonna say what,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
you know what I'm saying.
I do.
We don't like to hear that. And in the poor community, black, white, Asian, Spanish, it's the
27 seconds.
It means a lot. I mean, if you come to my house and you're cocky acting, and I just went through something, it's going to sound quick.
Can I ask you a real quick question? Actually, both, I agree with you, that initial interaction, based on the data, and I agree with, relationships is more important than numbers, but based on that information, can an assumption be made that our officers are doing that? Not perfectly, not every single time.
Some are doing that, but you have that very small percentage that don't do that.
Yeah.
They're up on their soapbox, and they look down on the community, the poor community. And that makes them feel some kind of way because everybody isn't as fortunate as the other person. So when you go to their house, you have to know how to talk to these people. And some officers really don't know how to talk to people. They just, it's like, drag me. Give me the facts, only the facts. I don't care about nothing else.
Joe Friday, yeah.
And I understand you. I ran from call, and it's a pain in the butt. You don't know when you're going to have a breather, but when that phone rings, you knew what you signed up for. You got to answer those calls, whether it's here and you're slow. You got to go from call to call to call to call. But each person you come into contact with, that individual, those individuals, each person, you have to put on a different face. And sometimes
Mr. Peoples, I'm sorry, just speaking to the microphone, please.
Yeah, we,
okay, can you hear me now? Sometimes people can't switch that face, and when you're a police officer, you have a lot of faces. You're the judge, you're the jury, you're a social worker, you're a mental health care worker. You have so many different faces that you have to wear, depending on what call you go to. And there's a lot of people that I think they have a problem switching up faces. I'll just say it like that. They don't know how to adapt. And it makes the job real hard, not only for the officer, but it makes it hard for the citizen that just went through something bad. You know, and I think the Akron Police Department needs to improve. Not to say they're not, because I know for a fact you have a lot of professional men and women on your department, and I know a few, and they do their job wholeheartedly, and they love police work. But you have that small percentage that you don't know about. And that's the ones that I have a problem with, because those are the ones that are out here and they go through the cracks and they use their badge in a way that they bring dishonor to the badge. And those are the ones, as you say, you're not going to put up with it, and they're out of here. And I want you to, and I know you will, stand by your word, and I know you're going to do that because you're the chief. I have a lot of respect for you.
Thank you.
Make sure that you get them out of here, because if you don't, this is going to continue and it's going to get worse. Akron is like a little Detroit. I mean, if you look at the numbers, and we'll talk about the numbers, they are disgusting. I mean, for a city under 200,000 to have all these problems, that's bad.
It's bad.
That's really bad. And that shouldn't be going on. We should educate each other instead of being one-sided. We need to be together. And that's where we come into play, where we're trying to bridge that gap, but we need help from you all.
Yes, sir.
And we need help from the community. And
so one of the things when I was interviewing for this job is I think I'm going on 13 years, 12 years as a chief. My job, as I've seen it, a primary job, is to build bridges into communities, right? Especially underrepresented communities. Bellevue is very, 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 very diverse. Caucasians were the minority in the city. And so we were building bridges, and what I said, and I continue to say, and I said it during my interview for the chief's job, is that the bridge that needs to be built, the vast majority of it, whether I'm right or wrong, this is how I feel, is our responsibility. If we lost trust, then we lost it. If we ever had it. I don't know if we did. So our responsibility is to build the biggest section of that bridge, but we can't build it all the way. Wherever we're building that bridge to, there's got to be some construction coming on the other way. And I will also tell you, sir, that when you look at that data, you look at the numbers, our officers are seeing a tremendous amount of trauma, and they're experiencing a tremendous amount of trauma day in and day out, night after night. And they're seeing something that is, whether they recognize it or not, that's forming preconceived notions. Potentially, that's human nature. We are working on programs to help with officer physical wellness, mental, emotional. Again, if our officers aren't prepared emotionally, mentally, and physically to go out and serve the public, then the things that you're talking about will happen. The first 27 seconds, absolutely. And I would also argue it goes for the entire contact. Even if we're making an arrest, we treat everybody with dignity, respect, and humanity. And if there is a fight, if somebody's resisting us, if they're, whatever is causing that, as soon as that fight is over, we go back into that customer service mode and treating them with dignity, respect, and humanity. Again, I believe our officers overall do that. Does everybody? I wouldn't, I would probably say it's in the numbers. Right. But I promise you this, that we are very vigilant to identify anybody that, everybody has a bad day. Right. But if we're seeing that cancer, and that's what those individuals, as well as I do, one person, all it takes is one person, and that tanks a relationship. Right. And if I also might, I also said earlier we disengaged, and that was my direction. Again, the community needed space. We need to heal. We are re-engaging. I commissioned advisory councils to the chief, Black community leaders, faith-based group, and now it's a new American advisory council. So it's immigrants coming into the country, into our city. Again, knowing how to interact, the cultural issues, and we're building on that. We got some work to do, and I'm committed that we're going to get it done.
And I think you will get it done. Like you said, there's a lot of different cultures that have settled in Akron, and the police department, they need to be trained on every culture that's here in the city, so they know how to interact with them. Yeah. If you go to somebody's house, for instance, a black family's house, we chastise our children differently than somebody from the white race. So if we had salt and pepper cars in Canton, and if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a black officer and a white officer in a car. We call them salt and pepper. We had salt and pepper cars, and that worked out very well because we both learned from each other. Yeah. And when we encountered a culture that neither one of us knew anything about, they taught us what we can do and what we can't do. It's unique.
We had one situation, two officers responded to a person in the Nepali community that was intoxicated, fallen down. Officer Suba, I don't know if you know Damber Suba, his story, he immigrated at 17, he was in refugee camps, I mean, the story is like a movie. He's very connected and well-respected in the entire community, but certainly in the Nepali community. The two officers go, Caucasian officer and Officer Suba. And the man was wearing a head covering, and there was grass in it. So the officer, the Caucasian officer, reached up to take the grass out, and the fight was on. And what it was, you don't touch that.
Yeah.
So culturally, the officer meant no offense by it. He was actually trying to be helpful. But when they resolved it, it was a growth moment for all of us.
Yes.
And we need to continue to step into this space.
We have to continue to do that.
Again, I know we got plenty more we got to cover, and I appreciate the discussion and dialogue. Last thing before we go, again, thank you, Chief Mylett, and also
Thanks, Chief.
Deputy Chief Harding. We keep referring back to the data, and I think the data is important. I also think what the data is telling us, which is concerning, when I look on these pages, the percentage of young and black that I see is very alarming to me. And so I appreciate, Ms. Williams, you bringing up kind of the strategic plan, if you will, to help to reduce the violence. What I hope we can see more, a little bit more, is we have to be able to acknowledge, as you came here and acknowledge the threats to your officers, Chief Mylett, I truly appreciate that. And I think we'll also have to be an acknowledgement within the African-American community of some of the things that we're seeing as we look at this data. It is a concern when I look at this that there's a lot of black loss, young black loss that we're seeing. And I think sometimes what people need to hear is the acknowledgement of that, and not almost the use of or the why. It's just like, hey man, can we just, man, this is alarming and devastating. So my hope is that our police department is a part of that strategic plan with Danico Buckley, that you all know it, understand it, and what are we really going to do to help to reduce this violence. And I think it's going to start with the relationship building aspect. I don't think it's an either or. I always think it's a both and. As you said, Mr. Peoples, we all have a role to play in this. So I don't want us all to leave here believing that it's just one-sided. It's everybody's responsibility, because I think the goal that we can all get around is the preservation of life. How we get there is what's going to be challenging to us all.
Amen.
To us as a board, to our police department, but man, we want to preserve life as much as possible. The data that I'm seeing on this is alarming. I understand we talked about the complaints and all that type of stuff and how great that looks. This other stuff looks terrible, and it's heartbreaking. And so please give us time to digest this. We may be calling you back in to ask more questions about it. If you please come back, we would absolutely love that. But we thank you for being with us on this evening.
Thank you. And Brian, can you collect
Yes, thank you.
the name? Because if I don't return these and they're not on the officer's uniform, they're going to get disciplined. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to present tonight. And I remain at your disposal if there's anything I can do or the police department can do to work in partnership. We are stand ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll progress into our agenda. We'll go into our subcommittee reports. First up is governance with Mr. Gippen.
Mr. Chairman, it's going to be a quick report. We did not have a governance committee meeting in which we did any governance work last night.
Shame on you, Mr. Gippen.
Shame accepted, but for good reason. We were meeting at the Firestone Park Library, and Councilman Kamer had, of course, had received notice, and he had talked to some of his folks. So in the meeting, we had, I want to say, 8, community members, 7 of them from Firestone Park. Imokai Okoa was also there. Councilman Amobian was there, and we had Captain Yohi and Lieutenant, and I'm going to forget it again, with a B, and they had been alerted to it, and I assume they had clearance, but they were at the meeting, and it turned into about an hour and a half or 2 hours of really excellent discussion about the role of this board and so on and so on. And I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but it was a marvelous meeting. Brandon and I were both taking notes, but we got no governance work done, and am I still shamed, Mr. Chairman, after all that?
Not at all, not at all. Mr. Gippen, appreciate your work, you and Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa, do you have anything to add?
We were in community with a number of folks who I think were not necessarily supportive of issue 10, and I think it was really interesting to hear their perspectives, and I think they appreciated being in dialogue.
And if I can just add to that, I think some minds got changed. I mean, by the end of I think everybody by the end pretty much understood, yeah, you know, issue 10 probably was a good thing. And even constructive enough that the one woman who was sort of the leading, initially, you know, opponent, if you want to say, an advocate for let the police do what the police want to do. I invited everybody to come to the community outreach committee meeting tonight. Well, 2 of them came, including that woman. Oh. And so I think her mind was definitely changed about her attitude about the board, and I think she's going to be helpful to our doing our work, helping to reach out to those people who are not especially supportive, or were not.
That's well said, Mr. Gippen and Mr. Costa. Really appreciate both of your work.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, in order to not keep this young lady longer, there was a young lady in the audience who came late who wanted to give a public comment. She asked me if she could. You know, it's up to you. It's up to you if you will allow her. If we're not going to allow her, I don't want her to have to stay any longer if she can't.
You brought it to us, so absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't know.
I couldn't wait. Thank you. Okay. I was watching you guys through Zoom, and I got a couple of messages and everything else, but I'm a advocate. I'm a activist. I've been out here protesting. Some of that stuff that he was saying, bull crap. I'm gonna try to watch my tone. Chief Mylett is the one thing that he does not understand. When all them protesters were being arrested, I went to go court support, went to go to, you know, advocate for them as well. A lot of the charges were dismissed on our protesters. There is possibility to where it's going to be a major lawsuits in Akron, because let's not forget Michael Harris, activist pressure, who came from North Carolina to protest, was beaten by APD. Officers had tear gassed protesters. We seen it on the news, as well as our children, who was also protesting that day. And no water bottles was not thrown until they were tear gassed, just not by APD, but our sheriffs. Then here it is. The reason why there is a TPO is because the federal court stepped in to give that order against APD. We shouldn't have to sit up here and keep on listening to bullcrap lies. I don't have nothing against him, but I have a lot to say when it comes down to the lies, because I'm just not watching. And thank God, because I was going to go out that day that they was tear gassing with my children. I have a son, and he's not too far from Jalen Walker. He's mental. He's in prison. And here it is. You know what a judge had just told me when I asked and begged for help ever since we moved here? Because APD put a gun to my son's head when he was 16 years old in front of my home. I didn't know the steps. We just moved here to Akron. I'm from Cleveland. I think the Citizens Review Board was I voted for it. So when I say that I, commend you guys, but I pray that you also listen to us as we voted for issue 10. I think the Citizens Review Board needs to be a little bit more twisted, because we need to hold our officers accountable for what they're doing out here. I heard through TikTok how an officer has set up here and threatened a protester, which is a victim. What is his name? James Williams. He was killed by a Canton police officer. She was protesting. You know what an officer told her? If you don't sit up here and stop protesting, we're gonna make sure you held accountable for every citation. She's protesting. They're mad because we're using our voices. My daughter used to want to be a police officer. Not no more. She's 11 years old. She came down here and spoke at council meetings and everything else. And, you know, I'm not saying that we never use the police. I just had to recently use it because a grown man approached her at a library. Was the officer helpful? No. You know what they charged him with? Harassing. Not arrest at all. She's 11, he was 35 years old. I spoke about that too. So what I'm saying is that we need to do better. I get that. I came to Akron because I'm a survivor. Do I want to stay in Akron? No. I'd rather go back home to Cleveland. At least their Citizen Review Board can fire. And I'm hoping that we can get to that point because, like I said, they need to be held accountable. We need to know the names. We don't trust them. I fear them. My 11-year-old fears them. I don't sit up there and tell my kids to hate the officers or anything like that. They make up their minds. They sit up there and say, bad officer. They're 6, 5, and 11. They're comprehending everything that they're seeing. Whether it's on the media, my daughter can't have social media, but her friends do. So guess how she's getting that information? She's getting it from her friends. When she seen Michael Harris getting beaten, she's the one that told me, let's go out and protest, Mom. We gotta do something. We gotta use our voices. 11-year-old telling me, as her mother, we gotta go out here and do something. So it's just the fact that we out here protesting, we're using our voices. We're being peaceful. But your officers are not. A lots of them. The disrespectfulness got to go. You want us to trust them? In order to get trust, you have to earn it. And right now, they have not earned nothing. Just not from last year, but from this year too. So I hope that you guys hold them accountable for their actions, just from not Jalen Walker, but from our protesters too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We didn't get your name, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna just give you my first name because of the situation with my daughter, but it's Lillian. And I can give it to you guys, the rest of it after.
Okay, thank you, Lillian.
I also appreciate the questions today that you asked Chief Mylett. I think it's important that this remain an independent board and that you, hold Mylett and the rest of the police department accountable. I think that was a really good show and y'all did a really good job. I was watching on YouTube while I was driving here and I heard Steve say a lot about how there were threats towards officers and how, they can't put name tags back on because they're scared for their lives and their families are scared for their lives. And also that they can't give an update on the investigations into these threats because they're still gathering evidence. And as somebody who knows the prosecutors pretty well, who knows the police department pretty well, if there's one thing they love to do, it's to charge people, Last year, they had over 75 protesters charged, most of whom were charged during the July 3 protests. It was a mass arrest. And like she had said, a lot of those charges end in dismissals. In fact, it wasn't just a lot. It's over like 80 or 90% of the charges from last year's protests. Some like 300 charges, over 75 people were dismissed. They were found not guilty. Other people had to sign plea deals because they couldn't continue to go to court because they had lost their jobs. Others were tripped into signing a waiver, and Gert Williams and Craig Morgan really liked the waiver because it basically forces people to sign away the right to sue the city, which is basically an admission that they have a case against the city, And so this idea that they're waiting to investigate threats against police officers is kind of just BS because if there was a case, they would have already charged the person, right? They would have immediately charged the person. Those Facebook comments and posts that Chief Mylett put up, Facebook, I don't know if y'all know, you can report a comment for harassment for violence. Those Facebook comments are still up. They don't contain anything that would incite violence against the police officers. And if they did, Facebook would have taken them down already, because I'm sure the police have already reported those comments, right? Right? Like if there was a case, Facebook would have taken those comments down. Additionally, like, there doesn't seem to be a conversation around the threat against people that we feel against from the police, you know. It's a lot that the police, who are heavily armed with pepper spray and machine guns and tanks, feel threatened by unarmed civilians, but there's no discussion around how civilians feel about the threats coming from the police department. In 2001, we discovered that an officer named Phil Sr. had a 3%er tattoo on his arm. He got it while he was employed by the Akron Police Department. And the 3%ers are a white supremacist militia organization. Canada declared them a terrorist organization. Several police departments around the country have fired police officers for just posting the 3%er emblem on their Facebook page or having it as a bumper sticker on their car. And what did the Akron Police Department do? That man is still employed by the police department. In fact, instead of investigating him thoroughly, they prosecuted me and my organization for bringing that to light just because we named him and said that he lived in Wadsworth. But that ended in the charges being dropped because they had no case against me. That was brought to you by Gert Wilms because, again, our prosecutors are not an independent body. They work for the police department, right? Then fast forward to this year, I'm again harassed on December 12th. Actually, it was the night the city council decided to sell White Pond. Everyone was ushered out of the room, and then I have a police investigator, Patrick Newman, waiting outside, grabs my phone out of my hand, pulls me into a room and says I'm being investigated for telecommunications harassment again. Eventually, in February, I got my phone back, and the charges were dismissed, and I can quote him. He said that the investigation into me was anticlimactic and a waste of resources. So we see that these prosecutors don't actually prosecute crime. If they did, they'd be prosecuting the police department. They're used as a weapon by the police department to quiet dissent. And just to go back to Phil Sr., Phil Sr. was a part of a 5 or 6 member gang inside the police department called Tango 22. And y'all should write that name down, Tango 22. Some of the officers that Mylett was talking about, whose names were leaked online, were gang members in that gang. They're a bunch of ex-military police officers. And when you look on their social media page, what do you see? You see images that incite people to run over protesters with your cars. You see images that are favorable to Pinochet, who was a ruthless dictator in South America who killed tens of thousands of civilians. There's specifically images of civilians being killed and thrown out of helicopters on this Facebook page that is ran by active Akron police officers. Do you think the prosecutors investigated them? Anybody want to answer? Do you think a single one of those people were investigated for posting on social media threats against civilians? The answer is no. They're all still hired, or they're all still employed by Akron Police Department. So again, y'all did a great job today of pushing back against the lies from Steve and the lies from the city. Keep doing that because they have a lot to cover up, okay? And please do not be used to rehabilitate their image. There's a reason why that most recent poll showed that a vast majority of the city wants top to bottom change in the police department, okay? It's not because they're misunderstood or they need a better PR campaign. It's because they need to be abolished because they're ruthless and they're a threat to all of our lives, okay? So I appreciate y'all. Keep bringing the fire.
Can we get your name, please, sir?
My name is Nick.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
All right, now we'll hear from Ms. Richards and our HR sub. Yes, quickly, please.
Okay, one thing I want to say is, like, it's kind of crazy that the kids that wanted to be police women and men don't even want to be police women and men no more because of the way how the system is. And I was one of those kids when I was younger, but since I grew up and how I seen how the system was, I don't want to be a police officer no more. And another thing is that some of the cities still want those 8 police officers fired or at least in jail. And we don't want them in the system, or we don't want them in the system. We want them gone, no matter what position they in. We are tired of saying names, and it's just crazy how we have to say these many names because of APD. That's all I want to say.
And what's your name?
My name is Kazima.
Kazima, I like your shirt. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Richards, HR Subcommittee.
Thank you. 2 issues from last week that I was charged with. One was contacting the city about space, and you all got emails, I believe. Next Wednesday at 5 o'clock, if you'd like to take a tour of a space in the Ocasek building that they have identified for us, you're welcome to do that. I will be there.
I would suggest it's just easier, the walkway, we could take across, so if we all meet out in the hallway at 5, we can just walk across, see the space. Just some historical perspective, I know Phil does not care to be in the police department. Before moving to the county building, he actually was in the basement across the street at City Center. Up until the point we were trying to sell City Center, we vacated the building, took space in the Ohio building, and I believe he's been there probably 2-3 years because we vacated City Center. So once we complete the remodeled Ocasek with the Akron Municipal Court, there's space there. Definitely would like to show you what the opportunity is. It's space that can be built out. So it's a blank canvas at this point. You can definitely take a look and see, would this meet the needs? Keep it in the footprint. You'd still get a police report at the police department, but then have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Young, his staff at the Ocasek building. So 5 o'clock, right out here, we can walk across the skywalk.
Thank you, Gert.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a question, suggestion. It occurred to me, I'm really, really glad that's going to be happening, of course, but it seemed to me that if it's possible within the available space to have at least one of the rooms that's whether it's thought of as a boardroom or a small conference room, but I think it'd be really good if we would also have just space in that complex if it's possible.
Yeah, Ms. Williams, is it a build out for us to be able to have space for our board?
Not likely. There is an auditorium in that space that is going to be used for the city. We technically are taking possession of the building, but the auditorium would be, I know you were looking maybe alternative meeting location. The auditorium would be available for a public meeting.
If I'm, Ms. Williams, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry, I really wasn't clear. I was just thinking of, it seemed to me that just a small space within the complex, which...
We are going to walk through with the contractors.
I'm going to be away next week.
Yep.
Just that idea, if it's possible to just have a small space that's whether it's, again, a small conference room or just a place for board members to be if we were down there. It just seemed to me that might be a helpful thing if it can be.
Maybe we should just see it first.
So Ms. Richards, if you could, if anybody has any suggestions as far as the space, if you could email Ms. Richards, I think that'd be good, because I know that you're going to be there heading that up.
I think we need to just see it first, and then we can go from there.
Yep.
Thank you, Gert. Yep. The next issue, we were talking about a potential hire last week, and the questions we have will be answered by a thorough background check, and so I authorized the city to start the background check on that applicant. And then we'll have all the information that we need, and we'll be able to go forward. Stacy said she believes they've started that, but there's apparently a backlog, so we potentially could be looking at another month yet before that's complete. I know that's not any information that we want to hear, but that's part of what the system is right now. New business that we worked on last night, our independent auditor is out of commission. We do not know for how long he is going to be out of commission. That means There's no one in the office. There's no one answering the complaint phone. Again, I reached out to the city, and Gert promised to come tonight and solve all our problems. So.
To listen to your problems. And I can't imagine it doesn't have the same impact. My desk phone you can forward. So I don't know if that's an option, if somebody wants to take those calls, if you're looking for, I know you guys Phil has a desk phone where complaints come in. I don't know if anybody else has access or can just monitor the voicemail. I don't know if Phil's given his password to anybody to monitor that. Has not?
No.
I spoke with him tonight right before I came in. He was able to, it's the first time I spoke with him since his surgery.
Okay.
The second time I've spoken with him. He said that the city won't allow us to have access to his phone or his laptop.
But I don't know that we need access to either one. If it's a phone call, we should be able to get that information. We can forward the phone. Is he checking things? Does he need help checking things? I guess what?
Well,
he's out of
he's not in a position right now.
He can't do the job.
Okay.
So I think one of my questions to you was, is there some internal person who could assist us with that?
Yeah.
Most of us all have full-time jobs, and we want to make sure the citizens are being heard, the complaints are being processed appropriately, and none of us know how to do that or have the experience or the time to do that.
And I want to be very aware of your independence.
Right.
So if you would like, Craig's with the prosecutor's office, one of the prosecutors could take a look at that. We could have Brian Harding with the police department take a look at that. We have run into this too. We have a communications team, and everybody takes turns answering the emails, and instead of sending it to someone's email personally, we set up press@akronohio.gov. And maybe we could get, a generic account where not just one person has access to it. So if somebody's out or, decides to leave the city, there's just continuity. It's still the same email address. We can make sure that password is shared with other people. I don't know what the generic name you would like to put with it, but still just akronohio.gov, and then it survives anybody.
So I know this was talked about with Ms. Belfance as far as our access to some of the investigations, or some of the complaints, I should say. And I know that Officer Beck was the one that Mr. Young was working with on the inside.
Yeah.
So if we get those, if there's a way to forward those email complaints to just simply our, I think it's CPOB email, which I think goes to all of us. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in saying that? Then we would need to, I would say, whoever the inside person is that's going to help us to do this, along with also Officer Beck, because that is kind of the process of the workflow. Yeah. We would just need to identify how that is and what that's going to look like moving forward, because the concern is, we don't know the indefinite amount of time, obviously, but at the same time, things just can't stop. So, and maybe that's a conversation offline that we need to meet, and who we need to meet with, and what that looks like.
Absolutely.
And so, is that something?
Yeah, I will definitely take that, figure out who we need to bring to the table, and potentially get some answers. In his absence, how do we move forward?
I think Officer Beck is on maternity leave, so we would need to.
So whose person's taking over for him? Well, we'd find that out, obviously. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Richard, is the question of how we're going to try to have Mr. Young's job done going to be on the committee agenda?
Yes.
Okay, because
that's what I'm bringing. That's what I'm bringing tonight. That's why.
Good. Okay. Yep.
Asked to come, or volunteered to come, because I reached out to them and said, "Is there an internal system? Are there options for us? Do we need to hire a contractor who knows what they're doing? Can we do that today? And then who would train that person to answer the phones and the emails and how to respond and all that kind of stuff?" I think we have a pretty steep hill to climb here.
I have a question. In some cities, and this is just something for us to think in terms of training the 311 to take complaints.
Our 311 is highway maintenance in Akron. Street cleaning.
So we don't have anybody for all intents, we don't have anyone for all intents and purposes that's doing that. So all these complaints are essentially falling through the cracks. We don't have we don't have Phil and we don't have Officer Beck, and this has been going on for
1 week.
1 week for
Phil.
For Phil, and then for Officer Beck, he's been off for at least, I think, 4 weeks.
I'm assuming they have someone covering
So,
for him,
but-
I would guess, but I don't know.
Beg your pardon? Who's taking the complaints, I guess the question is, and
Who's, Mr. Peoples, who's taking Mr. Buck's? Leaper? Leaper. Thank you.
Just really quickly, I know we had the discussion prior. I think now could be a good moment for us to explore the opportunity of us putting out an RFP for a contractor position to fill in. I know there's some concerns about who would train this individual, but the fact that we're building the ship and figuring out how we're steering the office to work right now could actually be a really cool opportunity for us to bring some fresh perspective for a person to actually do that. So again, I want to bring up that it might not be a bad idea for us to bring on a contractor to assist us. And I'd be happy with help, like putting together RFP or solicit process, but.
Mr. Costa, we did discuss that yesterday briefly at our committee meeting, and there's just a lot of logistics that goes into that where the conversation needs to be continued, but we did kind of throw out and brainstorm some ideas on expediting the process through the contract, so.
Yes, we talked about that last night, and I have an idea, a person who's he has his own investigation company, and I know that he does, his people do outside work. He worked on a very, very high-profile case with me up in Cleveland with on the federal level. He's very good. So we would have to decide, I guess, the description of what we want, though, first, before we start reaching out to people. I'm sorry? Yes, the scope of services. We would have to decide that first before reaching out to anyone. I think what we would need to, they would need to know how to do an auditor's work.
So, Ms. Richards, could you connect with Ms. Anaskevich to see about this person, to get this person information? How are we gonna go about, do we have a lead on contracting with someone? Is there something that you and your committee have discussed as far as a contract lead?
This was new to us last night.
Okay.
And so that was our first conversation. My job was to reach out to the city, see if there was anything internally they could do, which is why Gert is here. And then I think if we decide as a board we want to move forward with a contractor, then we'll start working on it.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a board decision, a total board decision, if we want to do that.
So,
Let's
let's
vote
make a
on it.
motion.
Sure.
Before we make a motion, really quick, I just wanted to be more specific who we were talking about. It's Thomas Fields and Associates.
Yes.
And this particular investigation firm is on Diagonal next to a prominent funeral home here. I did look at their website at our meeting last night, and they, as she just mentioned, they perform a wide scope of services, and they also do consultation. And so this is who we're talking about, is Thomas Fields and Associates.
Yes, Tom Fields and Associates. They're very, very good.
So,
Thank you, Tristan.
is there a motion on the floor to move forward with finding a contractor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the Human Resources Subcommittee is authorized to pursue identifying one or more potential subcontractors to temporarily perform Mr. Young's or the auditor's position.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. I got a second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'll reach out to him tomorrow, if it's
Well,
okay
hold
with you.
on.
Go ahead.
I think we need a budget process for this.
Well, so you'll work with Mr. Costa, Budget and Finance?
I will absolutely, but that's just part of it. We need
Yeah.
to be able to agree on, so
So, Ms. Richards, I think the first thing is that if we can have a scope of work, meet with them, they'll present to us what they feel, and then we'll bring that back to if it's a thing where going with Mr. Costa, if it's in our budget, to be able to do that.
I think because we're using public dollars, I think we need to put out an RFP that needs to be accessible from multiple bodies for people to bring forth an actual proposal. And then from there, be able to make a decision based upon who comes forward. It may be the case that multiple entities don't, but I think that we need to be careful in making sure that a variety of entities, individuals who could be interested in the position have the opportunity to.
Do you know what venue we would present that RFP in particular? Because it is legally, we do have to do an RFP, but do you know what venue you would, and how it would be presented?
I would imagine we put together the scope of the services, there is a budget and a proposed timeline that's stated under the RFP, and then we post it to LinkedIn, whatever. I guess if there's, city avenues that could be accessed as well too, but we just put it out there. And
Mr. Gibbon?
I think we need to work closely with the law department about this. I know enough to be dangerous, but it's possible this would be considered an emergency. That would cut short some of we really have to follow city procedures for this. So I think we need to get the law department involved. I have to think they'll be very helpful, but I would prefer too to have a choice, but that's why they have usually in contracting the emergency provisions that sometimes you just don't have the luxury of that. But I think we need to be, and I'll be happy to help. If you need some help with the law department interpretation, I'd be happy to help with that too if you like. But I think they need to be involved like tomorrow to make sure this is done right.
Well, some of the dilemma that we have is even just looking at the template that was provided to us to outline the scope of the independent auditor's position. The wording and the verbiage that's used is very lengthy, it's archaic, so we're kind of stuck trying to revise that. And now we're bringing in an RFP, we need a template, we need to figure out how do we go about doing that. So who do we talk to kind of get, is that fair, Ms. Richards, to get an example of?
I already sent that out to you. But I don't know that the RFP necessarily has to follow their job description. No, I don't think so, not for a contract worker. But so I totally agree, and I vote yes that we do that. However, we have a phone filling up with messages. I'm wondering if one of the options could be there's a message on that phone that says the independent auditor is not available, send an email or talk to the internal investigation, do something else so it's just not ringing and ringing and ringing or the voicemail box is full or something like that. I think that's a really bad look for us.
Can we direct them to our website?
Will you send me an email with the direct voicemail number so I can start working with communications to get that done for you?
I don't think do we have a?
I have his cell number, yes.
No, it's not the cell number, it's the city number that people call.
Phil Young's voicemail is what you're concerned about?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I don't have that.
And he has that forwarded to his phone, I think.
Okay.
So we could get that unforwarded and then put a different message on there, at least.
Can we direct them to our website on that voicemail?
Or if you shoot me an email with how you'd like that done, I can work with communications to get that up for you.
And then the next question is, we get those complaints on the website, then what do we do?
Well,
Yeah, because it sounds like the complaints via the website are going to Mr. Young still, right? So we need that information to be forwarded to
CPO.
Well, they have to come,
Mr. Gippen.
Before we move on, those are good topics, but there's a motion on the floor.
Absolutely. So is there any further discussion regarding moving forward and taking a vote on getting 1 to 2 to 3 outside contractors for this position? Excuse me. Is there any, is there any further discussion?
I just want to be clear, do you or do you all not want me to reach out with Tom Fields and Associates just to get information?
We're going to take a vote.
I know that's the
'cause there's a-
question.
But,
Okay.
is there any further discussion before we vote? Okay. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gippen?
Yes.
Peoples? Lewis?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Now, the question on the floor was from you, Ms. Reed, as far as the emails that are now going in for complaints. They currently go to Mr. Young's email.
Yeah, and I think it's just redundant. We just want to make sure that the phone calls, the voicemail, and the email systems that citizens are using to file complaints, that they're able to be forwarded to us somehow, so that way they're just not sitting in purgatory. And Ms. Worms, I believe you understood that, and you're going to get back to Ms. Richards on that, right?
Doing an email right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The question is then, if we get them, what are we doing? Who's responding? How are we managing this? Are we creating a, yeah.
I would think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, I mean, because if we're getting the complaints back from the police department that they have already investigated, and then it gets kicked back to Mr. Young, then we would have to, take it from that point and see whether, I guess we would contact the complainant.
I guess I'm more concerned at this moment for people filing new complaints and knowing that their complaint has been filed and heard and directed in the right spot.
They have to file it with the police department first, is my understanding. That's the very first complaint.
Well, or they can file
Avenue.
with Phil. That's their,
Yes, to Ms. Richards' point, they can initiate their complaint with Mr. Young, and then he then transfers it over to the
police
police
department.
department.
Okay.
So for those initial complaints, that is a concern, because if he's not available and they haven't went through the Akron Police Department, then it's just in limbo. But we did talk about this last night.
Yes, we did.
And it may be the process where if Sergeant Lepper, thank you, Sergeant Lipa is taking over for Sergeant Beck in the complaint process, temporarily we may have to just divert that information directly to Sergeant Lipa, because it would be going to him anyways.
Yes.
So we did talk about this last night, and that's the plan until we can get someone to fill the void. We would document that we received a complaint, and then we'll forward the investigation directly to Sergeant Lipa, because it has to go to him anyways, and we're not conducting any investigations on our end.
Go ahead, Mr. Gippen.
This is along the lines of thinking out loud, which is dangerous on the record, but I'll do it anyway. One alternative would be for those of us who would be willing and able to do it, and hopefully for as short a time as possible, but that we would basically, on probably a day-to-day basis, rotating, do just the basic work of fielding complaints and noting them, and there clearly needs to be some, dialogue with the complainant, if only to give assurance that the complaint's being received and will be handled. But one possibility would be for us to do that. I would think that a possible structure of us for doing that would be to create, at least on an ad hoc basis, a temporary basis, a subcommittee of some name, complaints subcommittee, I don't know. And then those who would be willing to serve on it, and someone's going to have to step up and chair it, you know, then just do that work through that committee again, hopefully for as little a time as possible. That may not be feasible, but it went through my head and I thought I should put it on the floor. I'm not making a motion, I'm just saying, is that a possibility that we think we could, would be better than just diverting it to the police department?
I agree with you. I don't think, and excuse me if my explanation for our temporary plan did not include customer service. That is very important. So it shouldn't just be forwarded. There is an expectation that there should be someone that is reaching out to the person to let them know that it was received and that we're going to transfer the information to the Akron Police Department. But yes, I do think in the interim there should be a customer service aspect. I think it's going to be difficult. Most of us work full-time jobs.
It would be very difficult, but I mean, if it was just a day at a time, and I mean, if we, you know, even having to get back to people in the evening, I mean, I could see where it would be doable. It is, I mean, you almost couldn't script what all's been going on with this since the outset, but, you know, maybe that's a way we could handle it for a very short period of time. I don't know.
I'd like to ask Gert a question. Gert, Ms. Williams, what did you all do in the past? I mean, there had to have been a time over the last 15, 16 years where the auditor wasn't available. Maybe he was on vacation or something like that. What did you all do then?
I apologize, I didn't have that on. He did not have day-to-day coverage. If there was an emergency, I think he made clear, called the police, and then he would deal with his caseload when he returned.
Okay, thank you.
The question is, how do we feel about that?
About what in specifically?
That right there, what Ms. Williams just said. Do we feel good about kind of doing it the same way it's always been? If we, you know, and we've said a lot of things here this evening, so I don't want to just run over things. I want to address the concern in the room as far as, hey, we've never, if you will, done this. And I also want to address the concern that the one thing that when you hear public comment, it was, hey, thank you and please remain independent. And we got to be honest, if we do that way, we no longer are independent. And so, you know, there's going to come a point in time where we're going to have to stick our toe in the deep end of the pool.
Well, I went swimming today, so I don't mind.
And what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that it's going to make us comfortable, but we have to be able to have a discussion about how this work is going to get done. So everybody's going to have to lend their voice to this. How is this going to get done? Because we don't know how many complaints are sitting on the voicemail. We don't know how many came in. It could be 1, it could be 0, it could be 100. But right now, we can say all the stuff. We love the committee that wrote issue 10. We're in these seats now. Fellow board members, I ask you, what is going to be our process right now?
Well, are people willing to, again, rotate a day and just do coverage that way, along the lines of what I said? I mean, I'm willing to do it. I mean, I'm with you. I'm willing to do it. I mean, I'm going on vacation on Friday, but I'm still willing to do it. Well, yeah, and I'm away next week.
Absolutely.
But this is going to go on longer than a week, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So this is a discussion we got to have as a board. Where are we at? Because it just can't be me and Mr. Gippen.
No, I'm willing to do it. I mean, I've always said I'm willing to do it.
I know you are, but then we have to talk about, from a governance perspective, what concerns do we have regarding any liabilities that we take on?
Oh, I'm not especially worried about that.
Okay.
Doing that is, Ms. Williams isn't in the law department, but I'm not concerned about liability. This to me entirely flows from our public function.
Okay.
Doing this.
So any other thoughts?
Yes. I don't know if the city has what's called virtual voicemail. I know for my office, and I'm certain it's a capacity to have, to make sure in the event that I am gone and patients have major concerns, then the voicemail is sent via email. So that way it has multiple people who can access it and get back to patients. I recommend that. I would most definitely, I work half a day on Fridays. I would be more than willing to cover a few hours, and I think that's a good intervention for now, is for us to take on cover Friday, and you take 2 hours and you call everyone back. And so if we all take a day, I think that'll be fair if we rotate.
Yeah, I think we probably, if we're, for those who are agreeing to do it, then we may have to figure out a schedule.
Ms. Richards, Mr. Costa.
Yeah, I'm totally willing to do a day. I think we need to get a script together, so we're all giving a consistent message, and then a consistent process of what we do from there. This is the other thing that I just thought of, Gert. I wonder if we need to put a sign on his door, because we tell people, he tells people, come into my office, do what you need, and I wonder if we need to put a sign on his door saying he's temporarily out.
I could pop over tomorrow to the county building.
Thank you.
Also, if we can have a spreadsheet to document, so that way everyone knows who's been called back, how many times we've spoken to them, so we'll have to create that too.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I am going to make a motion. I'm hearing enough that I think maybe that is the way to go here. I'm going to move.
Before you do that, sorry about that. Ms. Lewis and Mr. Peoples, love to hear from you. Just your thoughts.
I have no problem. I could.
Okay.
As far as investigate, I could investigate, and I do that too. I've got plenty of experience doing that stuff.
And leaping ahead of myself though, but I just asked, and if we do establish this temporary committee, Mr. Peoples said he would chair it, and my intention would be to nominate him to do that.
Thank you for jumping ahead as always, Mr. Gippen. We really appreciate it.
Mr. Peoples, can we convince you to take a leave of absence from your work to do this?
Yes, ma'am.
As an interim basis?
That's the nice thing about being a partner in a law firm. The clients decide what my time availability is. Yeah.
Ms. Lewis, you have any thoughts on this?
My concern is, like Bev said, the script or something that we can be uniform, number one, and some sort of training. I just don't think, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think anybody should be asked to do this on our board that does not feel.
I agree.
Right? Is this just volunteer?
Yeah,
Those
I
who
agree.
want to.
I just want people's thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I think there's wisdom in counsel. So I think what Ms. Lewis said is completely appropriate. Mr. Costa?
I've got some concerns with respect to, I think we want to be consistent with how complaints have been handled, and I wouldn't want anyone in particular to go on a runaway investigation, especially as we're still figuring out specifically what we're going to be doing. Just a moment. As we're still figuring out how the board is going to function, I think us having some degree of I don't know how to sparse that out. I think consistency is key, and I think that we need to be operating within the scope of how the auditor has historically audited. I think that it's great that the board does not actually, in the day-to-day work of managing the complaints, because it gives us a degree of, I guess, independence to have a bit of an objective view if things are to come before us in the future, based upon how we may deal with an individual or whatever relationship it may be formed based upon how we deal with an individual. But I am all for us going forward and stepping in to take this route. I have an incredibly limited capacity myself already, and so I personally may be limited in terms of how much I can help out with this, but I do think that this is a good move for us to do.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to clarify, I'm only contemplating that this is going to be essentially complaint processing at this point. It may be that, you know, we've had the conversations. I mean, it may be ultimately that there is some board role in investigation as such, but that's not the purpose of my motion. It is just that we, on a ministerial or administration basis, get this process for just intake and logging and everything else without going ahead and trying to investigate at this point, just to make that clear.
If I may, this is an unusual situation that none of us expected, and frankly, none of us really know how to do. You know, I think I agree with Mr. Costa. We really need to be careful. We don't want to take too deep of a dive into this when we really, this was one man's job. You know, we're citizens, we're a review board. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just intake and making sure we've got everything logged and we in a position to be turned over to whoever it is then finally able to deal with the complaints we get.
I think the city should try and help us out a little more on this. That's just my...
One positive spin and to bring some positive perspective to this, I think we can view this as an opportunity for us to get more intimately involved with the administrative process, which is going to help to inform our vision in how we build out this board and how it functions. So it is an opportunity, if nothing else.
Right, it's going to be a learning curve, but we want to learn it the right way.
Yeah, I think, just to piggyback on Mr. Costa, there's no other way we're going to learn it but getting in it. I mean, we got the workflow.
Yeah, I'm not saying not to do it.
I know, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provide, we have a playbook, at least to go by. We have an outline to go by. As we talk about training and all these things, we have a playbook to go by. So if we look at the workflow, the very first thing says complaint is forwarded to APD Patrol Operations. We know who that person is, Mr. Lipa, correct? So then the complaint is investigated, and so it seems like we're going to have to keep in contact with Mr. Lipa as far as, hey, what's the status of the investigation? How's that going? So it's going to be a lot of customer service. But also, too, it's going to be an opportunity to see where are some of the gaps at. Just looking at this from not being so deep in the weeds of this every day and being able to look at it from the outside in and say, hey, man, what if this happened? What if this is a part of the flow chart? So I think we have all the stuff, if you will, a script that we need that. I know, Ms. Richards, you asked for as well. There's kind of a script here. Now, are you talking about a script of what we're going to say?
A response.
To the people, or a response?
But see, I don't know if we can do that because everyone's complaint is going to be different. And what script might fit one person is not going to fit another person.
From what I gathered talking to Phil, a lot of complaints come with very limited information. And he has to call back and say, well, what time, and so that's what he spends a lot of time doing. But I'm wondering if that's where we can just forward the names and things to Mr. Leppa and say, can you follow up on this to make this a full complaint?
I think some of it might just end up being common sense on how to respond. I mean, these people aren't calling in with really abstract complaints. Like Mr. Chairman Boyd said, we already have a boilerplate script, so to speak. Flow chart.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think more so what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, there may be elements that are necessary before it's forwarded. So you're saying a rubric of the exact elements that are necessary before it gets forwarded to the Akron Police Department. I think we could probably get that information from Mr. Leppa.
Yes.
Who? I think someone should get with Mr. Leppa, maybe the law department of the city, I don't know, and create that
I'd be more than
script.
happy to do that. If I can just get Mr. Leppa's number or phone number to reach out to him.
You have it on the email.
I have it. I will reach out to him, and I will get that out to you all, and I'll create a template on the information that's needed before we forward it to him.
All right. Thank you.
You ready for a motion, or?
Go ahead, Mr. Costa.
Just really quickly, I'm envisioning almost like a checklist, a series of items, boom, 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 was this done? And then we need all just a shared spreadsheet in order to track the complaints, the date that it came in, was it filed, or was it forwarded over to APD? And I think that would be a good way for shared accountability.
We should be able to create that spreadsheet inside of our email. It's included in Microsoft Office, so we can create a citizen's complaint Excel spreadsheet.
Mr. Gibbon?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we create the complaints subcommittee with the understanding that it's intended to be temporary until we have staff that can resume the function. The purpose of the committee would be to carry out the intake function that Mr. Young carries out, that is to say, receiving complaints, having some interaction with the complainant, so as to be able to create a sufficient description, of the complaint, carry out the forwarding to the police department that is part of the workflow now, and otherwise, and customer service was used to, to explain to the complainant the situation and hopefully get their indulgence and assurance that their complaint is going to be processed by us as soon as possible when we've got staff back to do it. So that's a longer motion, but the motion really is to create the complaints committee.
Oh, I got a second?
Second.
Roll call, Anaskevich.
I'm going to abstain for the moment.
Gibbon?
Yes.
Peoples? Yes. Lewis?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Boyd? Yes. Are you just sustaining?
Yeah, I just had, everybody's on subcommittee. I'm just wondering, how's this going to work with the subcommittee? Or should it just be something that we all get involved with? Because we already, like even just yesterday, there were 2 or 3 subcommittees going on throughout the city at one time? It's not like there's 15 of us. I don't know.
That's why on June the 28th, we're going to revisit our every week meetings.
All right. Well, look, I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not.
Everybody is spread so thin.
But I think everybody's going to contribute to this, even if they're not saying, "Hey, I'm going to be following a flow chart." Everybody's going to be contributing in their way. That's what I heard in dialogue. And
okay. Is that the way it's going to be? Let's do a roll call.
I mean, that's what I heard.
Okay.
Now.
So, do we need a subcommittee then if everyone's going to contribute?
I think
that's
that
my
we should.
question.
I think that we should. We just voted.
Okay.
And it passed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Are you voting?
Ms. Lewis, did you have something?
Vote?
You said we're going to revisit something June 28th. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I was.
What did you say?
We talked about this 2 meetings ago about our process. It was brought up 2 weeks ago about, hey, do we need to scale back how this group meets every week to going every other week so that subcommittees have more time to actually do work from a subcommittee perspective, so that when we come back to this meeting, we're doing more voting versus trying to handle everything here.
My only concern with an additional subcommittee, and I'm for that, is that we have subcommittees that are going on and people are not engaged in those subcommittees that they're involved in. So another layer of that may present a problem.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, again, this is intended to only exist
Yeah, it's
for
temporary.
as little time as possible.
Absolutely.
I just to close matters out, I didn't know whether Ms. Anaskevich wanted to vote.
Anaskevich.
Anaskevich, did you want to cast a vote or no?
Well, you know, look, I'll go with the majority. I'll say yes, but I have concerns, but for now, I'll just say yes.
You don't have to say yes.
Sure don't.
You can.
Well, I mean, I have some concerns, but I don't want, I would rather discuss them in an executive session, I guess.
If the vote's complete, then, Mr. Chair, I have another motion. I nominate Mr. Peoples to chair the new complaints subcommittee.
I have a second.
Second.
Mr. Peoples, would you have any discussion, or is this something that you're? Okay. Let's roll call vote. Anaskevich?
I don't know. I would rather hear from Mr. Peoples first.
Mr. Peoples? So you'd rather hear from you. What, I don't know, what would you like to hear?
Oh, I thought you said you had a problem. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Mr. Peoples,
misheard.
I don't want to be a nuisance, but if you don't mind moving the mic closer, so we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, then yes.
I'll do it.
On the
All
record.
right. Roll call, Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Okay, so I just want to make sure we're on the same page before we leave tonight, because obviously, like, we're going to be here for, yeah. So the process now, what we're going to be done is, you're doing what, Ms. Reed?
I am emailing Mr. Leppa, who is currently handling investigations temporarily for Sergeant Beck's absence, to let him be made aware that we are temporarily taking over for our independent auditor, and we would like a process, which I just got from you as well, thank you, for some bullet points.
Was that the workflow?
Yep, so I can create a script on the necessities that are required before we forward the information we've collected to Mr. Sergeant Leppa. So what I will be sending out, hopefully tomorrow, if he gets back to me, is a bullet point of the information that is required for him to be able to fully move forward with an investigation.
Could you make sure that Mr. Peoples is CC'd on that email?
Yep, I actually CC'd everyone.
Oh, okay.
But just largely because I think if we all have the information, but yes.
Yeah.
So the moment I get that, I will get that to you, Mr. Peoples, and then I will also go into our office and create a spreadsheet with some information, and then we can discuss next week if there's any feedback on any of the headings or subheadings that need to be changed.
And so, Mr. Peoples, we'll take your lead from the standpoint of what Mr. Gippin brought up. If we need to step in to assist with any phone calls, please, I mean, you tell us.
Okay.
All right, you're gonna, for those who have the time and the ability to do that, like I do, just let me know. I mean, I'll be where I'm at, but it doesn't matter. If there's help needed, I'll do it. So, if you don't mind, is that okay? Can you orchestrate that?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, anything else before we?
I want to make a really quick comment, because I think I need to be transparent with everyone. I think when we first started off on the board and we were volunteering for subcommittees, I kind of bit off a lot more than I can chew. I'm currently have a lot going on in my personal life. There's been deaths in my family the past month. In addition to that, I am working on my doctorate, as everyone knows, and I need to be more committed to prioritizing things more correctly. So I did talk with our board yesterday and made clear my commitment to being on that subcommittee. But the other subcommittees, which was budget and finance and community relations, I'm going to pull back. I have to honor the commitment to some things in my personal life as well, to my family. And I think I would better be served working with the the HR committee right now, and I will do my due diligence in volunteering as much as I can for the new subcommittee, but I want it to be transparent about, I'm stretched thin.
Thank you for that, Ms. Reed, and condolences.
Yes,
to
thank
and your
you.
family,
Condolences,
for sure.
yeah.
And, you know, just I love the word transparency, and I want to say it for all of us. If there's something that we need to bring to the group, let's do that. Let's be okay to do that. There's no shame, there's no condemnation in what we're doing, because all of us had a life before this, and we kind of, we didn't know we were getting into this early in the race. But thank you for setting that and modeling that example, Ms. Reed, and for anybody else, if you gotta move away or step off, that, you know, we definitely understand that. Let's just make sure we're communicating with each other. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, if we're finished, I just want to do a really quick executive session for a full okay?
I'm sorry, we still have Mr. Costa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we have the community engagement,
Yes.
just really quickly.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we're still fine-tuning our organizational template for community engagement. Just one more bullet point. We're continuing to create a database for resources for community partners. And so far as the survey, we didn't get to that particular point, but I reached out to the Summit County because they are doing they've done surveys like this, and so one of the things that we have to think in terms of, do we want to use a software like SurveyMonkey, or do we want to, you know, do a more in-depth kind of survey with regard to the citizens? So that's a point that we want to revisit. Have a few events on tap to attend, and I will be looking at several different locations along with another one of the subcommittee members for our meet, greet, and eat event. And I'll be looking at House 330, looking at the library and the well to determine which is the best fit. So we'll need some, of course, I'll get back. And then the other thing is, I wanted to know, since we're doing this two-sided glossy about how do we file a complaint with regard to the police and those 4 or 5 options, how are we coming with the logo?
Oh, I'll have something, hopefully by the end of the week to send out to everybody.
Okay, another proof?
Yeah, just another proof, yep.
Okay.
Because I think from the report last week, everybody wanted a white background. It's just pretty much black and white. That's what I went back and told them, so I'm just waiting.
So on the flip side of that, infograph or fast fact kind of thing, we wanted to be able to put what our purpose is, and when I say our purpose, the Oversight Board, and then our contact information. So we don't have, or do we, or maybe I missed some kind of a overarching mission statement and purpose of the Oversight Board.
Yeah, I believe that's probably within the charter that we can
It's
take
within
some
the
of that.
charter, we need to pull it out,
Yeah.
correct? Okay, so
Yeah.
we want to do that before we would distribute that, so that's something that we need to revisit.
Okay. Is there a subcommittee that you would like to work on that, or was that something that you?
No, I think that that's something that the board needs to do.
Yeah, basically, the board would have to decide on what we want our mission statement to be, if it's going to be on our cards and being handed out. Mission statements are usually not longer than
One sentence.
right, or a paragraph.
Yeah, I know what they are. I'm just saying, who's gonna do that to pull it out to bring some samples?
Can community engagement take lead on that and
Yeah.
bring a draft to us to review?
No, I want the board to do that, because
But somebody has to be the point, I guess, person or people to give us proofs, just like with the logo.
I thought that that was something that you were doing along with the logo. And-
I wasn't. I was just doing the logo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do a draft.
Anything else, community engagement?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. And budget and finance.
Okay, not much of a overly in-depth report. I'm sorry, I told everybody I was gonna get you business cards. I went to Staples to have them made, and the smallest quantity I can have them made in was 250 per, and that just seemed like a little absurd for them to be preliminary cards. So I just wanted to see where we're at with timeline on getting the logo, in which you just addressed now. So I can get like perforated paper and try to make some little cards, or I can just hold until we have a logo, whatever y'all prefer. But I just need some feedback there. I am hoping to connect with Michael Wheeler and Steve Fricker with respect to tracking payouts. That's one thing that I can't figure out from an internal system. I would like to bring y'all an updated budget in terms of showing you exactly where we're at and how much has been paid specifically specifically to us, but also to employees, and just where we're at on a up-to-date budget. But I still need to get some things figured out specifically on how we can exactly track the expenses that's been occurred since the last budget that I've received. So that's something that I'm working on, and I'm hoping to get to y'all within the next couple of weeks as well too. And that is about it. We'll meet next at 5 o'clock, and I'll work with Bob to figure out which, Mr. Gippen, to figure out which library. Are you out of town next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be no governance committee meeting next week.
Okay, well, since we are now the only two members of the Budget and Finance Committee, then there may not be.
Well, if you want to kind of meet with yourself and get some of this stuff done, I have no objection.
I do that all the time.
Right.
I just want to make a correction. I will make sure that I will send the logo in an email. I won't send it to everybody, but I'll send to make sure they're printed out for you all to look at and to vote on what you like next Wednesday, as far as the logo. All right? Awesome. Going on to new business, I see, do we still need to talk about the retreat, or do we have everything
Yes,
for that?
real quick, everyone has committed to July 22nd except for Ms. Lewis said she can't make that day. But we have, I have people in place to contact once we decide if we're still going to do that day, or if you all want to look for a different day where all of us can be available. I don't know if Ms. Lewis cares if we go ahead without her. I don't know. She'll have to speak on that.
I think we should all be present.
I think so too. It's a retreat for all of us. So, I mean, look, we can go into August or even September if we have to. We just need a date where everyone can go. That's the purpose of a retreat, is for every single person to be able to be there.
So do we want to go into August go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
Let me see if I can rework, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Oh.
Can you let us know?
Thank you so much.
Like next week or something?
Via email before then.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'll
I
reach out to
appreciate
the people, but I do think we should all be present
I agree.
at the retreat. So,
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank
you, Ms. Anaskevich. Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
The purpose needs to be stated, so.
Go ahead, Ms. Anaskevich.
I make a motion that we move into.
What's the purpose?
The purpose is to talk about our auditor, the condition of our auditor. The circumstances surrounding our auditor. So I move that we go into a brief, and I do mean brief, executive session.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Anaskevich.
Yes.
Gippen.
Yes.
Peoples. Yes. Lewis. Costa.
Yes.
Did I get you, Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Richards. Reed.
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Thank you so much. We'll go into executive session. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. So much for my, and then on a positive note.
Yes.
All right. All right, we consider ourselves adjourned. Everybody have a safe